Ethan wasn't concerned with whether Deputy Mayor Tanner lived or died. He was concerned with who had sent assassins after Sienna Sterling. Who were the gunmen tonight? Ethan asked. Sienna took a sip of her wine. I imagine they were some of the gentleman's old protégés in the city administration. They're terrified I'll fall into the hands of the federal task force. Ethan drew a sharp breath. Come with me. I'll arrange for you to leave the country as soon as possible. If we delay any longer, I'm afraid you won't be able to get out. Sienna stared at him, her eyes tinged with a sour sadness. Her voice was cool. Ethan, sometimes I fantasize. If Isabelle Thorne didn't exist, would you be with me? Ethan shook his head without a second thought. No, you're lying. He didn't want to continue the conversation. Come with me, he repeated. A faint smile touched Sienna's lips, as if she already had her answer. A man might be drawn to many women in his life, but once he was married, he had to maintain a certain loyalty. Ethan, Sienna said, swirling the wine in her glass and changing the subject. Don't you think there's something strange about the gentleman's downfall? Ethan looked at her, his expression thoughtful, waiting for her to continue. The gentleman may have been outmaneuvered by your father, but he was no fool. How could he have been defeated so easily by the two of you? Ethan's lips twitched. Go on. Sienna pulled out the photograph and handed it to Ethan. This was taken at the estate in London. That estate was the escape route he left for me. Besides him and me, no one else knew about it. He was obsessed with privacy and never allowed me to take pictures. He certainly wouldn't have taken one himself. Now look at the angle this was shot from and the position of the swing set. If I remember correctly, the photographer must have been outside the estate grounds. Ethan's brow furrowed. Are you saying someone followed you to the estate in London? I've never seen the gentleman with this photo before, Sienna said. And look how new it is. Does that look like something he carried around with him all the time? For it to suddenly appear in his hands that night. Isn't that strange? She paused, her tone hardening slightly. That estate was my only way out. So, someone used this photo to threaten him. Through you. Ethan was stunned. Sienna didn't answer directly. His lung condition wouldn't have held out for much longer. Ethan's mind was a chaotic mess. If that was true, then Feng, the gentleman, was most likely just a scapegoat. I heard your father died in an accident. Is that right? Sienna asked suddenly, a strange smile on her face. That's some accident. Ethan looked up, his gaze complex. What do you know? Sienna drained her glass, took a breath, and said, The gentleman hired an assassin to take out Director Irons. He never intended for me to know, but I stumbled upon the assassin going to his room. The man specializes in making deaths look like accidents. A Frenchman named Mike. In an instant, Ethan's face went ashen. He clenched his fists so hard his knuckles cracked. The next day, in the afternoon, Ethan brought his men to the area. The maid guarding the bedroom door gave a slight nod. Young mister. Ethan, she greeted, stepping aside to let him pass. The others were stopped at the door. Inside the bedroom, Theodore Vance was propped up against the headboard. Little Lucy was having a grand time, using his body as a winding mountain road for a small toy car. Grandfather, how are you feeling today? Ethan asked as he entered, his tone concerned but carrying a distinct chill. Lucy, barefoot, leaped off the bed and threw herself into Ethan's arms. Brother, hold me. Ethan grabbed the little girl by the collar and tossed her onto the sofa. Settle down. Be quiet for a minute. You mean, brother? Humph. The little girl pouted, mimicking a cartoon character by crossing her arms, twisting her neck, and sticking out her lower lip. It was impossibly cute. A moment later, she added, I miss Daddy. Where did Daddy go? Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came out. He turned silently and went to the living room, returning a moment later with a basin of hot water. Grandfather, let me wash your feet. Theodore looked baffled. What for? Why all of a sudden? Before, I never knew how to cherish my family, Ethan said, placing the basin by the bed. Now, I want to show my respect. Theodore sighed and grumbled. If you manage your father's company well, that's respect enough. A man shouldn't be sentimental like a woman. Ethan didn't back down. It's just washing your feet. It won't take long. I wanted to do this for my father, but I don't have the chance anymore. Theodore could no longer refuse. He held out an arm for Ethan to help him sit up, then pulled back the covers. Ethan, his expression unreadable, bent down to take off his grandfather's socks. Theodore looked a bit uncomfortable, but didn't stop him. After removing the sock from the right foot, Ethan's mind tensed. He then slowly removed the sock from the left foot. Both feet had all 5 toes. Ethan's eyelids fluttered. He silently lifted his grandfather's feet and placed them in the basin, washing them while his mind churned. Lucy hopped off the sofa and trotted over, eager to help wash her grandfather's feet, occasionally showing off her math skills. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Brother, some people have 5 toes, but some people have 4. Grandpa Watkins has 4. The sudden statement made Ethan freeze on the spot. A moment later, keeping his voice as steady as possible, he asked Lucy, "How do you know that?" The little girl gently scratched her grandfather's instep and murmured, "I went to Grandpa Watkins's courtyard to play once. He was taking a nap, and I counted them myself. He lost it when he was in the service," Theodore said, then looked at Ethan. He had already noticed something was off with his grandson. After a moment's hesitation, he asked, puzzled, "Ethan, you didn't just come here to wash my feet today, did you? What is it you really want? Just say it." Ethan dried his grandfather's feet and helped him lean back against the headboard. Staring into the old man's eyes, he said with a grim face, "The leader of the celestial axis is missing a toe." "What?" The old man's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're saying—" No, that's not right. When I led the charge to wipe out the celestial axis, old Watkins was the fiercest fighter of all. Besides, didn't you already kill the leader of the celestial axis? The one you killed was also missing a toe, wasn't he? Seeing his grandfather's reaction, Ethan felt a wave of relief. It seemed he didn't know. In truth, from the moment he had suspected his grandfather, Ethan couldn't figure one thing out. Theodore had been in a coma the day Victor died. How could he have possibly planned the murder? But if it was Mr. Watkins, that made perfect sense. During those days, Mr. Watkins had disappeared. He had all the time and opportunity in the world to plot Victor's demise. Ruffin was coerced. Ethan gritted his teeth. "Grandfather, where exactly is Mr. Watkins from?" Theodore's gaze flickered, and he glared at Ethan. "You little bastard," he said, his voice laced with anger. "You washed my feet today because you suspected me?" Ethan felt a pang of guilt and explained, "Ruffin hired an assassin who specializes in making deaths look like accidents. My father's death is definitely connected to him. First, Ruffin was used as a scapegoat, and then my father was killed right after. Putting the two together, it was hard for me not to suspect you." "You fool," Theodore rebuked. "In your heart, am I that much lower than dirt?" Ethan lowered his head and said no more. The old man was furious, but his anger was mostly directed at Mr. Watkins. He was the best, most trusted brother he'd ever had in his life. And yet, this so-called brother had been running a monstrous operation right under his nose. And he had been completely oblivious. "That animal. I was kept in the dark by him this whole time." The old man cursed, then let out a long, heavy sigh. He called for the maid. "Quick, call old Watkins." As soon as he said it, Ethan quickly stopped him. "Wait, Jax, come in." Jax strode into the bedroom. "Boss, what is it?" Ethan gestured to him and introduced him to his grandfather. "Grandfather, this brother of mine is a hacker. When you call Mr. Watkins, try to keep him on the line for as long as you can. Jax can pinpoint his location." Theodore thought for a moment and nodded in understanding. Once Jax was ready, he dialed Mr. Watkins' number. "Theodore, are you feeling better?" Mr. Watkins asked warmly as soon as he answered. Theodore suppressed his emotions, his voice calm. "Better. Old Watkins, when are you coming back?" "It'll be a few more days." I had some money sent to you. Did you receive it?" "I did, Theodore. How's that good-for-nothing son of yours doing?" The two old friends chatted for about 2 minutes, Theodore maintaining a flawless composure. Right now, he wanted to find Mr. Watkins even more than Ethan did. There were many things he needed to ask him. In reality, it took Jax less than 30 seconds to lock onto Mr. Watkins' location. He was at a slaughterhouse on the western outskirts of Port Sterling. After hanging up, the old man looked at the restless Ethan and said, "I'll send my man. You shouldn't risk it." Ethan shook his head. "I'm going myself." Though the situation was becoming clear, Ethan felt a sense of unease. Ruffin had been coerced into being a scapegoat for Sienna's sake. But why was he also missing a toe? And that toe had clearly been gone for a long time. Was there some connection between him and Mr. Watkins? He could only ask Mr. Watkins. Seeing the determination in Ethan's eyes, the old man stopped trying to persuade him. "I'll send some men with you. You must not get hurt." At 11 o'clock that night, under a dark, moonless sky, at the remote slaughterhouse, a few burly men were drinking and playing cards in the guardhouse. After a while, one of them grumbled, "Strange, how come there's no signal? Hey, why are the monitors all static? What the hell? Is this place haunted?" Just as he finished speaking, a handsome man with a deadpan expression slowly pushed open the door. The men glanced at each other, then all turned to stare at Finn, standing in the doorway. The largest of them stood up, took 2 steps to the door, and gave Finn a light shove. "Hey, what do you want?" Finn's gaze swept over their faces before he calmly closed the door. "Yo, I'm talking to you. What the hell do you want? You deaf? Looking for a beating, are you?" "Sheba." A moment later, The guardhouse door was pulled open. Finn stepped out calmly, his face spattered with blood, the kukri in his hand, now stained red. The next second, Ethan and Benny, leading a dozen heavily armed gunmen, stormed through the gate in tactical formation. Finn didn't join them. He returned to the car to wait with Jax. Perhaps because the signal was suddenly cut, gunmen hidden inside the facility came out to investigate. Not long after Ethan's group entered, they ran head-on into a patrol. A firefight erupted, the crackle of gunfire echoing through the night. In the middle of the battle, Ethan took a moment to rip open the shirt of a gunman who had been shot in the head. On his chest was the unmistakable tattoo of the celestial axis. "We need Watkins alive," Ethan commanded before continuing the charge. Though the celestial axis had the numbers, they were caught off guard and quickly fell into disarray. Soon, Ethan's team made their way to the basement. The slaughterhouse itself wasn't large, but the basement was a different world, filled with medical equipment and panicked researchers who were either fleeing or cowering on the floor. To avoid complications, Ethan gave a direct order. Besides Watkins, leave no one alive. Instantly, screams and cries filled the basement, turning it into a vision of hell. In the deepest part of the basement was a dark space that resembled a conference room, identical to the Celestial Axis headquarters Ethan had previously destroyed. At a round table, an old man wearing a dragon head mask sat alone on a grand chair. He seemed oblivious to the gunfire, as still as a statue. A moment later, a middle-aged woman wearing a green snake mask and holding two pistols ran over, panting in panic. "Ethan Vance is here." The old man remained composed. He silently took out a small, exquisite pistol, hid it in his sleeve, and continued to sit, saying nothing. The woman in the snake mask stomped her foot in frustration, swapped magazines in her pistols, and looked ready to make a last stand. However, just as she turned to leave, she was shot in the head. The next moment, Ethan's group rushed in, a dozen guns aimed squarely at the old man in the chair. "Take off the mask," Ethan barked. The old man let out a strange, bitter laugh. "You little devil, why couldn't you just give me a few more days?" Heh, this research was on the verge of success. It was Mr. Watkins' voice. Ethan gritted his teeth, his voice like ice. "Mr. Watkins, you've hidden yourself well." Mr. Watkins sighed. "Was it the phone call this afternoon that gave me away?" "Heh, I'm curious. How did you know it was me?" He would probably never have guessed that it was little Lucy who had seen his foot while he was sleeping. Ethan had no interest in explaining. He asked through clenched teeth, "Why did you kill my father? If he didn't die, my celestial axis would never know peace." Mr. Watkins said, "You can only blame him for being too clever." Benny roared and was about to rush forward and tear the old bastard apart, but Ethan stopped him. "I have a question for you. What is your relationship with Ruffon? Whether I tell you or not, what does it matter?" Hith. You might as well guess for yourself." With that, Mr. Watkins took a deep breath, his eyes filled with a look of finality. "Fate. It's all fate." After a couple of mournful sighs, Mr. Watkins slowly raised his hand, as if to take off his mask. However, the next moment, a gunshot rang out. The old man had used the small pistol hidden in his sleeve to take his own life. Meanwhile, Mike, the French assassin, who had been hiding in a corner, took the opportunity to slip out of the basement. He was wearing a helmet, likely to avoid being recognized by Ethan's crew as he had been before. He moved with agile skill, and in no time, he had scaled a wall and was fleeing for his life. He hadn't run far when a buzzing sound came from above. A chill went down Mike's spine. He didn't need to look to know there was a drone hovering over him. "Damn it, Tony, you bastard!" Mike cursed, changing direction and running into a field, heading for the coast. But before he could take another step, a figure appeared before him like a ghost. Looking at that expressionless face, Mike felt as if he were seeing his own grim reaper. The world-class assassin was so terrified he couldn't move, his body trembling violently. "You still haven't kicked that bad habit of running for your life whenever you're in danger," Finn said calmly, his eyes dark. He then threw a punch at Mike's throat. As Mike instinctively raised his hands to his neck, the killer god moved with lightning speed, drew his kukri, and thrust it horizontally, piercing through Mike's palms and skewering both of his hands together. At the same time, at South Cove Pier, 3 black Mercedes sedans were parked by the side of the road, apparently waiting for someone. Before long, a smuggling boat slowly pulled up to the shore. 2 men dressed as bodyguards got out of the lead car, scanned the area vigilantly, and then walked toward the boat. A few moments later, the 2 bodyguards returned with 4 middle-aged men and led them to the middle Mercedes. The 4 men were bizarrely dressed and disheveled. One even had a patched-up backpack. It looked like day laborers coming into the city for work. When they saw the Mercedes, their eyes lit up. They chattered excitedly in Thai. Though no one understood them, it wasn't hard to guess they were talking about the car. After a moment, the rear window of the Mercedes rolled down. The four men fell silent, smiling with a simple-minded charm. One of them spoke in broken English. "Boss, when we do job, you tell us now we... Very expensive." The person in the car chuckled. Fair enough, fair enough." As dawn broke, Ethan Vance burned Mike alive in front of Victor Vance's grave. The genius assassin didn't deny murdering Victor. Mr. Watkins had lured him with drugs, promising that if he succeeded, he would fund an army for him in the Golden Triangle and put him in charge of the Celestial Axis's entire drug operation. As an addict, Mike couldn't resist such a monumental temptation. However, wary of Ethan and his crew, he hesitated. Seeing his indecision, Mr. Watkins revealed the research project the Celestial Axis had been working on for years, a project that, once successful, would yield endless wealth. In the end, Mike decided to take the risk. A grand future was better than a lifetime of hiding in the shadows. The night Victor went to negotiate the acquisition with Triumph Investments shareholders, Mike followed him and found the accident-prone curve on the road. A road Victor had to take to return to the manor. He lay in wait, and when Victor was on his way back, he used an air gun with special, custom-made glass bullets to shoot out the tire at the perfect angle, faking an accident. He just never expected Ethan to track him down so quickly. Everything seemed to have been settled. But with Mr. Watkins's death, some truths became secrets that could never be unraveled. Who would have thought that a mere butler was the leader of the Celestial Axis? What puzzled Ethan even more was the relationship between Mr. Watkins and Ruffung. Why were they both missing a toe? But did any of that still matter? Everyone involved was dead. 3 days later, after much persuasion from Theodore, Ethan finally decided to stay. At noon, in the area at Phoenix Crest Manor, a maid helped Theodore into the courtyard to sunbathe. The old man lay back in a rocking chair, his eyes gently closed. The sunlight on his wrinkled face brought a little color back to his cheeks, and his breathing was even. "Sir, a message just came from downstairs. Young Mr. Ethan has sent his brothers off. Their flight to Australia left half an hour ago." Theodore mused. "All of them?" "Yes, the big one and the 2 foreigners." The maid paused, then added, "Oh, and Sienna Sterling. Mr. Ethan got her a fake passport. She's on a different flight to the United States. She should have just taken off." Theodore was satisfied. He nodded slowly. "Ethan has finally grown up. Huh, it's good that he's staying." "Very good." His tone then shifted. "And Harrison? What has he been up to?" The maid sighed. "He's been incredibly busy. He's managing the new factory construction on one hand and dealing with the moles your third son planted in Vance Holdings on the other. He's already cleaned out quite a few in the last 3 days. I hear he's not happy with your arrangement. It seems he doesn't want to split the headquarters in 2. What about the board members at headquarters? What's their attitude?" Theodore asked, his eyes opening to a slit. "Everyone is on edge. No one dares to take a side for now. However, I heard that the female secretary who was always with your third son is hosting a dinner for all the board members of an estate tonight. Her purpose is obvious, to win them over before Harrison can. Victor's infiltration of the headquarters is likely deeper than I anticipated. Harrison is going to be at a disadvantage. Ahem. But doesn't matter. Let them try to win people over. As long as I'm alive, they can't turn the world upside down." Just as Theodore finished speaking, Dr. Linus Hayes walked in through the courtyard gate. Seeing the old man, the medical genius quickened his pace. "Mr. Vance," he greeted. Theodore nodded slowly, a faint smile on his face. "Dr. Hayes, where have you been?" "Just taking a walk around the grounds to clear my head. Staying up here on a mountain all day must be a real hardship for you," the old man said. "I've already spoken with the hospital. You can start your new position soon." Linus was taken aback. "Ah," the old man smiled. "You're a great talent and should be given great responsibilities. I'm a dying man. I have no right to hold back your abilities." Linus was quite excited. After thanking him, he said, "No matter what, I'll still live at the manor, to be available should you need me." The old man acknowledged him and waved him off. The maid beside him watched Linus return to his room, a flicker of cunning in her eyes. Theodore glanced at her sideways and asked in a low voice, "How is the medicine Dr. Hayes has been prescribing for me lately?" The maid couldn't help but sigh. His use of medicine is masterful. A perfect balance of strength and subtlety. I've studied medicine for half my life, but I'm nowhere near his level. Theodore's lips moved, and he muttered, "A once-in-a-generation talent." That afternoon, after seeing his brothers off at the airport, Ethan went alone to Elysian Media to pick up his wife for lunch. The couple chose a Chinese restaurant just downstairs. Isabelle had wanted to go to the airport with him, but Ethan had refused. He'd also told her not to mention it to that stubborn therapist, afraid that Zoe Russell would have a hard time accepting the news. Now, seeing Ethan's gloomy face, Isabelle didn't know how to comfort him. She just squeezed his hand tightly. Even after they finished eating, Ethan hadn't said a word, his brow furrowed in thought. His mood seemed to grow heavier. Isabelle had a nagging feeling that something was wrong with her husband, and it wasn't just because his brothers had left. Ever since everything had supposedly been settled, Ethan hadn't shown much joy for his hard-won revenge. Instead, he'd been quiet and withdrawn, his eyes always lost in thought. He would also come home very late every night, and she didn't know where he was going. Furthermore, his brothers were incredibly close to him. Even if they were leaving, would they leave so quickly? Had they had a falling out? After all, Ethan had promised them he would leave the country with them after everything was done, and now he had suddenly changed his mind. After much thought, the beautiful woman couldn't help but ask, "Honey, are you hiding something from me?" Ethan blinked in confusion, then shook his head. "No." Isabelle got up and sat down next to him, taking his arm. "It's all over, isn't it?" she said softly. Ethan nodded, reaching up to gently stroke her cheek. "Yeah, it's over." Isabelle stared into his eyes. "You're really not hiding anything from me?" Ethan shook his head again. "What could I possibly hide from you?" Although Isabelle still felt something was off, she didn't press him. She knew her man. If he wanted to tell her, he would. Everyone has the right to choose their own life. If they don't want to be tied down to Port Sterling, let them live as they wish, Isabelle said, hugging him. "If you miss them, we can go abroad to find them." Ethan smiled faintly. "Okay." Isabelle was silent for a moment, then suddenly changed the subject. "By the way, honey, can we not live at the manor?" Ethan asked, "What's wrong? You seem fine with it the last couple of days. You've been busy lately, so you probably haven't noticed. More than half of the maids and bodyguards in our father's courtyard have been replaced. They're all new faces, and they're so sullen. It feels very strange. That's just grandfather worrying about our safety. He arranged it specially." Ethan reassured her. "If it makes you uncomfortable, I'll tell them to only leave Lily with you at night." Isabelle pouted, looking a little helpless. "Okay. Anyway, try to come home earlier at night from now on. I only feel safe when you're here." "All right," Ethan smiled, his tone doting. "Once I'm done with these next couple of days, I'll pick you up from work every evening and spend time with you. Pinky promise. Don't you dare lie to me." Ethan hooked his pinky with his wife's. Just then, a message from Leo Bishop came through. "Boss, everything's normal. She's still at the hospital. The doctor prescribed another day's worth of medicine. All prenatal stuff." Ethan replied, "Keep a close watch. Don't let her spot you, and also pay attention to see if anyone else is watching her." "Leo, don't worry. You know my two guys are pros at tailing people. No mistakes will be made." Ethan was lost in thought, about to put his phone away, when Victor's beautiful secretary called him. At 9 o'clock that evening, after a gloomy afternoon, the sky erupted with thunder, and a torrential downpour began. At an estate on the outskirts of the city, all the members of the Vance Holdings board had gathered. The secretary had invited them in Ethan's name, so not a single one dared to be absent. Before long, Ethan entered the grand hall with the secretary. The board members, all men over 50, rose to their feet in unison, their faces fawning and sycophantic as they greeted the young master. Ethan's expression was unreadable. After taking a seat, he looked around at the group and said coolly, "Let's eat first. Tonight, we'll have a good chat." The directors nodded eagerly, their demeanor obsequious but their actions betraying their unease. Theodore had already held a video conference proposing to split Vance Holdings in two. Harrison Vance was undoubtedly a million times against this. So, logically, tonight should have been Harrison hosting them, asking them to jointly petition the old man to retract the plan to split the family. But Ethan's intentions were also easy to guess. The inheritance Victor had left him was substantial. Adding half of Vance Holdings to that would give him enough power to crush Harrison. Once Theodore was gone, taking back the other half from Harrison wouldn't be difficult. So, the purpose of tonight's meeting was likely to win them over, to prevent them from supporting Harrison, thus ensuring the successful division of the company. Either way, they faced a difficult choice tonight. They ate and drank for over an hour, but Ethan didn't mention the company at all. In truth, if the secretary hadn't spent the afternoon pleading with him, bringing Victor's elite team to beg, and even invoking the name of the deceased Victor, he wouldn't have come. He had no interest in fighting Harrison. To put it another way, he had been kidnapped by his own father. Inheriting the family business was something his own conscience was forcing him to do. Seeing Ethan remain silent, the directors were on pins and needles, constantly exchanging glances. The secretary, seated next to Ethan, discreetly answered a call, then raised her glass, offered a few flattering words, and toasted the group. She then turned, took a file from her bag, and addressed them. Gentlemen, I've invited you here today because Mr. Vance wanted to meet you all. To put it simply, he wants to get acquainted for the sake of future work. Before she could finish, one director stood up first, a sycophantic smile on his face. Not at all, not at all. We should be the ones saying that. In fact, we've been wanting to have a meal with Mr. Vance for a long time. Ethan returned a smile, but said nothing. His head bowed as he looked at his phone. Half a minute ago, Leo Bishop had sent another message. She's at the train station. My guys are still on her. Ethan replied, follow her, even if she leaves the city. The secretary, noticing his distraction, exchanged a few pleasantries with the director on his behalf. Then, she handed the file over and said with a smile, Gentlemen, I'm guessing none of you want to see the Vance family split in two, do you? Here, sign this. I believe the old man will take your recommendation into consideration. Her words stunned the directors. Don't split the family? That meant they were supposed to fight Harrison directly? Wasn't this a bit too hasty? But on the other hand, it would keep them out of the direct line of fire. They wouldn't be seriously offending Harrison, so signing it wouldn't be a big deal. However, the director who took the file looked terrified, his hands trembling as he held it. The director next to him, impatient, snatched the file away. He took one look and froze, his eyes wide with shock, as if he'd seen a ghost. The document had 2 points. First, a motion not to split the company. Second, due to the extremely negative impact of Harrison Vance's large-scale personnel changes, the board unanimously agreed to dismiss Harrison Vance as CEO and recommend Ethan Vance to take his place. This was blatant rebellion. The old man was still alive. The directors looked at each other, all breaking out in a cold sweat. The secretary, unperturbed, crossed her arms. I understand your predicament. This is indeed a difficult document to sign. However, you might want to consider this. Setting everything else aside, we have already secured Triumph investments. Furthermore, the import-export trade, the very foundation of the Vance empire, has been under our control for decades. Do you think Harrison has a chance of winning? To be blunt, we could break away and form our own company. But if we do, Vance Holdings will suffer a devastating blow. Gentlemen, your wallets will suffer along with it. A lifetime of hard work, all for nothing in the end. Is it worth it? The directors were sweating profusely. Ethan's chances of winning were high. That was a fact. But Theodore Vance was still alive. The secretary smiled a sinister smile and continued. In any case, the cards are on the table. Don't think you can stay out of this. Tonight, there are only 2 outcomes. Either you sign and stay for another drink, or you leave now. But, she glanced at Ethan, then back at the directors. On behalf of Mr. Vance, I solemnly declare, after tonight, whoever stands against us, we will crush them. Without mercy. Whether you want to be friends or enemies, you'd better think it over carefully. Boom! As the secretary finished speaking, a sudden clap of thunder startled the directors, making them all jump. The secretary's gaze was sharp as it swept across their faces, finally landing on a bald director. I'll sign, the bald man stammered, picking up the pen and being the first to sign. In truth, he had always been one of Victor's men. His move now was simply to sway the others. With a leader emerging, the others felt their internal struggle intensify. Unconsciously, they began to lean toward Ethan. The secretary looked at another director and smiled. Mr. Joan, why don't you make your position clear? I think the others are waiting for your lead. The director, Mr. Joan, swallowed hard. He stared at Ethan for a moment, then slowly closed his eyes and picked up the pen. The secretary's eyes lit up. A glance from the corner of her eye caught Ethan looking at her, and she turned to give him a playful wink. Ethan pursed his lips. For some reason, he felt this secretary's methods were remarkably similar to his father's. Perhaps it was from being with him for so long. However, just as Mr. Joan was about to sign, his phone rang. He took it out, saw it was Harrison, and nonchalantly put the pen down and stood up to take the call outside. The rain poured down, making the night seem darker than usual. A convoy of 7 or 8 cars moved slowly through the downpour. In the Rolls-Royce Cullinan in the middle, Chase sat in the back, loading a magazine, while Harrison calmly spoke on the phone. Mr. Joan, have you taken a side? Harrison, what are you talking about? Harrison cut him off. Have you taken a side? Mr. Joan stammered. We just gonna have dinner with him. Oh, Harrison said calmly. Well, I don't suppose you brought my cousin a welcome gift. It's just dinner. How about this? I'll be there in about half an hour. I'll deliver it for you. My aunt collected a lot of evidence of my uncle's crimes and almost sent him to prison. You seem to have contributed quite a bit to that effort. I wonder if I give this gift to my cousin, will he like it? Mr. Zhong's hand tightened around the phone. Harrison had no patience to wait for a reply. After hanging up, his eyes flickered, and he made another call. Meanwhile, Mr. Zhong returned to the living room, trying to appear calm. He stared at Ethan for a moment, then finally capped the pen. I need to think about it more, he said, his face troubled. A director sitting next to him frowned, trying to decipher Mr. Zhong's intentions when his own phone rang. Seeing it was Harrison, he also quietly went outside to answer. Mr. Wang, are you enjoying your dinner? Harrison, you know, I was just... I understand, Harrison interrupted. He invited you. It would be rude not to go. But since you've given him face, I wonder if you also mentioned how much you've skimmed from the 2 ports over the years. How many smugglers you've harbored. You even reported my uncle to cover your own smuggling operations. Mr. Wang's eyes shot open. I'll be there in half an hour at most, Harrison said. If you forgot to tell him, I don't mind passing along the message for you. He hung up immediately. Chase finished loading the magazine and turned to Harrison. Are you really going to do this to your cousin? Harrison's lips moved. As he dialed another number, he said inexplicably, Can you do it? Chase was taken aback for a moment, then shrugged. What's there for me not to do? He crossed the line tonight. Anyway, if you tell me to shoot, I'll shoot. Harrison made the call, then said to Chase, Ethan wouldn't do something like this. It's my uncle's dogs. He paused, smacking his lips. I have a strange feeling. All of this feels like my uncle's handiwork. The moves are too fast. In truth, he had never planned on splitting the inheritance with Ethan. That was why he had been frantically rooting out moles. Once they were all gone, he would have had a fair fight with Ethan. But he never expected Ethan to move so quickly, so suddenly, leaving him no room to breathe and backing him into a corner. It all felt like something his cunning old uncle would orchestrate. But he was dead. He had seen the body with his own eyes. Back at the estate, Mr. Wang's composure was clearly not as good as Mr. Zhong's. When he returned to the living room, he was visibly shaken. I also need to think about it. Ethan took a breath. It wasn't hard to guess that the calls they had received were from Harrison, or maybe even his grandfather. It seemed they had some leverage on them. Ethan, who was already uninterested in this whole drama, didn't feel particularly disappointed. He remained distracted, occasionally texting Leo Bishop. The secretary beside him had clearly figured out what was happening, but she seemed remarkably calm. Ethan noticed this and felt a strange sense of curiosity. Does she have another card to play? Next, 2 more directors received calls from Harrison. When they returned, they echoed the first 2, saying they needed to reconsider. The secretary smiled and sighed, cutting straight to the point. Did Harrison tell you how long it would take him to get here? The directors were stunned again, lowering their heads and not daring to respond. Half an hour? An hour? Never mind. Let's say an hour. If he's not here in an hour, it can only mean he's not coming. Then you can all just sign. How about that? Hearing this, Ethan's face darkened. He stood up and pulled the secretary aside, questioning her in a low voice. What are you planning to do to Harrison? Are you hiding something from me? The secretary smiled. Young master, you're just too soft-hearted. If you were in Harrison's shoes tonight, do you think he wouldn't make a move against you? Ethan was silent. Everyone said that the gentlemanly Harrison would never harm his family. But in a situation like this, if their positions were reversed, Harrison would surely not be merciful. His refusal to split the inheritance was proof enough. He couldn't tolerate Ethan's existence unless Ethan gave up his claim. The secretary smiled knowingly. It seems the young master understands now. One mountain cannot hold 2 tigers. If we didn't invite these directors tonight, Harrison would have invited them tomorrow. We had to strike first. Ethan was already preoccupied with another matter, a colossal theory he had been piecing together over the last 3 days. Hearing the secretary's words, he grew annoyed. Whatever you do, leave him alive, he said curtly. He was finding this secretary more and more formidable. Her perspective, her strategic thinking, and her ruthless execution were exactly like his father's, especially when it came to her cunning. Could it be that shrewdness and ruthlessness are sexually transmitted? He wondered wryly. Hearing her young master's command to spare Harrison, the secretary smiled and nodded, saying nothing. If Victor Vance had been there, he would have surely said 4 words. Fair enough, fair enough. Meanwhile, Harrison's convoy had reached the outskirts of the city and was about to leave the urban area. In about 20 minutes, they would arrive at the estate where Ethan was. Right now, the convoy was stopped at a red light. Not far behind, a small 3-wheeled vehicle slowly emerged from a side road. The man driving it wore a raincoat. In the small cargo bed sat 3 other men, also clad in plastic rain ponchos with tattered backpacks. Before long, the three-wheeler pulled up alongside the Cullinan. Chase and the driver in the front seat instinctively reached for their guns, but seeing that the 4 men looked like scrap collectors, they didn't think much of it and just watched them from inside the car. The man driving was exceptionally ugly, with a bulbous nose, a frog-like mouth, and bulging eyes. His features seemed to have a mind of their own. His skin was dark and weathered. He turned his head to look at the Cullinan, then got off his vehicle. Like a curious child, he pressed his face against the rear window, cupping his hands around his eyes to peer inside. This action immediately alerted Chase. He lowered the window a crack and said irritably, "Get lost." The man nodded with a foolish grin. He heard his companion behind him say in Thai the license plate, "This is the one." Then, he casually pulled a palm-sized metal disc from his pocket and stuck it to the window. When Chase saw the red light blinking on the disc, his heart sank. "Bomb!" The instant Chase shouted bomb. Harrison had already thrown open the car door, grabbing Chase's arm and rolling out onto the pavement. Boom! A violent explosion rocked the massive vehicle, nearly flipping it over. But thanks to past experiences, Harrison had reinforced the car with an extra layer of ballistic steel and a coat of imported blast-resistant paint. The body wasn't severely damaged, but all the windows were shattered. Harrison's quick reaction had saved them. Chase, a step behind, was cut by glass shards, leaving 2 long, bloody, but not too deep, gashes on his back. At the same time, the bodyguards from the other cars drew their guns and got out, but the 4 scrap collectors had vanished into the rainy night. The next moment, a flash of lightning tore through the sky, illuminating the earth like day. The bodyguards sensed something and looked up, only to see bombs raining down from the side of the road like a macabre confetti shower. Boom, 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 boom. Under the barrage of explosions, the unprepared bodyguards were decimated in an instant. The survivors scrambled for cover, retreating to the other side of the road before daring to return fire. Ignoring the pain, and without a thought of fighting back, Chase grabbed Harrison and dragged him away. Even now, Harrison couldn't believe it. Ethan had tried to have him assassinated. No, it was the dogs his uncle had raised. They've rebelled. They're staging a coup tonight. After retreating a safe distance, Harrison stopped abruptly, his fists clenched. He shook off Chase's hand. "To the estate. I want to see Ethan." Chase's eyes widened. "Are you insane? He's obviously prepared to kill you tonight." Harrison's lips were a thin line. He headed straight for the Audi A6 at the front of the convoy, which was mostly intact apart from its shattered windows. Chase gritted his teeth, his expression conflicted, but he followed without hesitation. "Hey, we need to deal with those 4 assassins first. Harrison, are you listening to me?" As he spoke, a spray of bullets flew past them. Chase immediately tackled Harrison, shielding him with his own body. After a moment, they rolled to the side, and Chase began to return fire. Though Harrison had never been in a firefight of this magnitude, he wasn't afraid. Seeing the wounds on Chase's back, his anger surged. After a brief exchange of fire, Harrison seized an opportunity to open the car door. He glanced at the bodyguards engaging the 4 assassins, said nothing, and was about to get in. Chase, having just reloaded, didn't try to persuade him further. He grabbed Harrison's arm. "You sit in the back. I'll drive." Once they were in the car, Chase floored it. But with all the windows, including the windshield, gone, the rain lashed their faces, making it almost impossible to see. After leaving the immediate combat zone, Chase had to slow down. "Harrison, listen to me. Let's take a detour back." Harrison was resolute. "To the estate. It's not far." As the A6 sped away, the 4 assassins tried to give chase, but they were pinned down by Harrison's bodyguards. They opened up with their AK-47s, engaging in a fierce firefight. Several passing cars, hearing the gunshots, quickly turned around, and a few people called the police. About 3 or 4 minutes later, the gunfire ceased. The 4 assassins emerged from their cover unscathed. They looked at the bodies littering the ground with cold indifference. Then all turned their gaze to the Cullinan. The frog-mouthed assassin cradled his AK, scratching his head with the barrel. His eyes gleamed. "This car must be worth a lot, huh? It didn't even blow up," he said in Thai. Another man wiped the rain from his face and mumbled, $1 million, maybe? The frog-mouthed man clicked his tongue. "How many people would we have to kill to afford that? It's all your fault. I could tell this client was rich, and I told him we were expensive. Why did you only charge him $500,000? We should have asked for at least $550. We used to do jobs for just a few thousand. Well, I'm quitting once I make 200 grand. I'm going back home, buying a big house, getting married, and buying a big tractor to go back to farming." "Fine. Should we chase them now?" The three-wheeler probably can't keep up. Call a cab? We can't get one out here. As they were talking, the faint sound of sirens approached. The frog-mouthed man stood on his toes, peering into the distance. Let's hide for now. We can kill him another day. Make sure you remember his face. Back at the estate, the board members were on pins and needles. Every second felt like an eternity. They had understood the secretary's words clearly. Victor Vance's branch was rebelling. Tonight, Harrison was likely doomed, but they decided to wait, at least for the half-hour Harrison himself had said it would take him to arrive. The secretary, Evelyn Reed, appeared to have everything under control. She sat calmly next to Ethan, occasionally glancing at him. She noticed that her young master seemed even more distracted than before, almost agitated, and she wondered who he was constantly texting. It was strange, but given her position, she didn't dare ask. A moment later, her phone rang. Oh, hee. Clean up the scene. When she answered, a flicker of surprise crossed her face, but it was quickly replaced by delight. It seemed Harrison had met with misfortune. Seeing this, the board members grew even more anxious, their faces a mask of terror. Ethan, however, let out a sigh of relief. He had caught that brief look of surprise in Evelyn's eyes. Harrison was definitely fine, but her ability to adapt was truly impressive. She was, after all, someone who had been by his father's side for nearly a decade. She had clearly learned a lot. Evelyn nonchalantly glanced at the directors, said nothing, and looked at her watch. She then poured herself a glass of red wine and sipped it with relish, as if celebrating early. The minutes ticked by. The half-hour deadline passed, but Harrison did not arrive. Mr. Wong couldn't take it anymore. He was the first to break. Evelyn, I made up my mind. I'll sign. The secretary's full name was Evelyn Reed. By calling her Evelyn, Mr. Wong was signaling his allegiance. Evelyn gave a faint, indifferent smile, not looking particularly pleased. All right. She then looked at the others. Seeing Mr. Zhong reach for his phone, about to get up, she sighed with a pout. Gentlemen, some things are already set in stone. It's pouring rain outside. Are you really going to waste the night away? Ugh. If you must, Mr. Zhong, you're quite close with Harrison. Why don't you give him a call right now and ask him why he hasn't arrived? Hiv. Mr. Zhong had intended to use the call as an excuse to leave, but her words stopped him. He forced a smile. I'll sign. He had no idea that while Evelyn had appeared calm, her palms had been sweating. But in this psychological battle, she had won. However, just as the last director signed his name and Evelyn took the file, a shout echoed from outside. Ethan Vance. Hearing Harrison's voice, the director's hearts sank. They instantly realized they had been played by that bewitching secretary. Evelyn Reed. You. Mr. Zhong pointed a trembling finger at her, too enraged to speak. Unfazed, Evelyn handed the file to Ethan with both hands and smiled. Young master, hold on to this. Then she turned to the directors. What's with those expressions? We're all family now. Hiv. Come on, shall we go out and see? The directors gritted their teeth, but none had the courage to face Harrison. They sat frozen in their chairs, heads bowed in silence. Ethan sighed and shook his head. Without even glancing at the file, he handed it back to Evelyn. You hold it. Then, he stood up and walked out of the living room. In the courtyard, the bodyguards Evelyn had brought had surrounded Harrison and Chase. In the pouring rain, both men were soaked to the bone. Chase's face was dark as he scanned the circle of bodyguards, his eyes fierce. Harrison stood fearless, looking up at Ethan under the eaves, his jaw tight. Do you have any idea that the dogs your father raised tried to kill me? Ethan took a breath, his voice cool. What are you talking about? Are you sleepwalking? As he spoke, Evelyn walked out with a coat and draped it over Ethan's shoulders. Young master, be careful not to catch a cold, she said softly. Harrison glared at Evelyn, then back at Ethan. Did I not tell you, you do not harm family? Ethan's lips twitched. Are we family? Heh, my father's gone. I don't have any family left. Evelyn looked at Harrison with mockery. Eldest young master, don't make baseless accusations. We've been here all night. We had no time to try and kill you. You, on the other hand, storming in here in a rage. What do you want? When did the affairs of us brothers become the business of an outsider like you? Evelyn shrugged and fell silent. Brother, Ethan said, slowly descending the steps, his tone like ice. I want to hear the truth from you. Did you ever think about killing me? Evelyn followed, closely behind, holding an umbrella over his head. Young master, be careful not to catch a cold, she said softly. Harrison shook his head gently. I just don't want to see the Vance family split apart. Ethan countered, you mean you don't want the Vance family to fall into my hands? So what if I do? Harrison shot back, his anger rising. Look at you. What can you do besides kill? If you become the heir, the Vance dynasty will only decline. So you decided to kill me? You talk about family, but are you even worthy? Believe it or not, I came here tonight to negotiate, Harrison said, wiping the rain from his face. Let those directors go with me, and I'll pretend tonight never happened. Ethan smiled and shook his head. And if I say no? Harrison slowly closed his eyes. The next moment, he pulled a gun from his waistband and aimed it at Ethan. At the same time, Chase also raised his gun, warily watching the bodyguards. Nobody move, he warned, subconsciously taking a step back to position himself behind Harrison's right shoulder. Ethan blinked calmly. Pointing a gun at me? Have you lost your mind? Harrison stared at Ethan, his voice heavy. I just want to tell you that I never thought about killing you. Tonight, I really came to negotiate. If I wanted to kill you, I would have done it already. As he finished speaking, 7 of the 9 bodyguards surrounding them suddenly turned their guns and aimed them at Ethan. The remaining 2 were disarmed and forced to their knees before they could even react. The situation reversed in an instant. Evelyn's face went pale for a second, but she quickly composed herself. She instinctively stepped in front of Ethan and spoke coldly to the 7 traitors. Well, it's true what they say. It's always the enemy within. Do you have any idea the consequences of being a traitor? It was only in this moment that Chase understood why Harrison had dared to come to the estate with only him as backup. Despite the betrayal, Ethan was not panicked. He calmly pulled Evelyn aside. I don't need to hide behind a woman, he said with a faint smile. Evelyn glanced at Ethan, then lowered her head and smiled, completely composed. Brother, playing a little game of internal affairs, are we? Ethan quipped. Not bad, you planted them deep. These faces are familiar. They were with my father for quite a few years, weren't they? Harrison's expression was extremely complicated. Ethan, I never wanted things to get to this point. You forced my hand tonight. I just wanted to prove that I don't want to kill you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be standing here right now. Ethan laughed inexplicably. Brother, did you forget? I have another identity. I'm the Grand Master of the East Side Syndicate. As his words fell, the chaotic sound of footsteps echoed from outside the estate. Everyone was stunned, turning to look at the main gate. The gate was unlit, and the combination of rain and inky darkness obscured their view. They could only hear the footsteps growing louder, closer, filling their hearts with a primal, unknown fear, as if rising from hell itself. Boom! A clap of thunder. Lightning spread across the sky like a spiderweb, shattering the dark expanse. For a moment, the entire estate was as bright as day, and what the onlookers at the gate saw left them speechless with terror. Dylan, the blonde kid, led a massive crew of 40 to 50 men pouring into the estate like an army of ghosts. The bodyguards who had just defected felt their courage evaporate, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. Some were shaking so badly they could barely hold their guns. Though Evelyn knew Ethan had brought men, she hadn't expected him to have so many lying in wait. Well, she sighed. Dylan led his men to the center of the courtyard with a menacing air. With a slight raise of his hand, they all stopped, lowered their heads, and shouted in unison, Grandmaster. Harrison never imagined Ethan would have this kind of backup. Had Ethan known all along that those bodyguards were his men? There was no other explanation. Realizing this, Harrison slowly tilted his head back, letting the cold rain wash over his face, his eyes filling with despair and resignation. Put down your guns. Ethan, let them go. I'll be at your mercy. Before Ethan could respond, the traitorous bodyguards threw down their weapons and raised their hands high, as if desperate for Ethan to see. Ethan's tone was frigid. You were right. All I know how to do is kill. So, don't think about killing me again. You're really no match for me. Now get out. Young master. Evelyn tried to interject, but a look from Ethan silenced her. She hadn't planned on letting Harrison live tonight. Chase swallowed hard and patted Harrison's arm. Let's go. Go. Harrison's eyes were dull. He slowly stepped back, but the next second, in a shocking move, the usually composed eldest son of the Vance family raised his gun again, aimed it at Ethan, and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Harrison's shot was sudden, his action lightning fast. Across from them, Evelyn's face changed dramatically, but she was powerless to react. Ethan merely frowned, not flinching or dodging. In that split second, Chase, who had been standing behind Harrison and watching his every move, suddenly grabbed Harrison's wrist. Just as Harrison pulled the trigger, Chase violently forced his hand skyward. With his other hand, Chase pressed his own gun to Harrison's neck. But Harrison's gun never fired. The slide locked back, unchambered. Evelyn, who had been about to push Ethan out of the way, froze. Dylan, who had only half drawn his gun, was equally stunned. Chase's expression shifted from shock to confusion, and finally to a look of guilt and difficulty. Harrison slowly turned his head, his gaze falling on Chase, devoid of surprise or confusion. The empty gun had struck a bullseye right in his own heart. Thunder rumbled, and rain fell in sheets. The dozens of people in the courtyard were utterly silent. Harrison stared at Chase for a long time, said nothing, dropped the gun, and silently turned to leave. The eldest grandson of the Vance family had proven one thing. He truly would not harm his family. Dylan looked at Ethan, who waved a hand, and the crew parted to let Harrison pass. Chase watched the lonely figure recede, a sourness rising in his chest. He understood why Harrison had fireblank. Ethan pursed his lips, took the umbrella from Evelyn's hand, walked forward 2 steps, and handed it to Chase. He said nothing, just patted his arm. He could understand what Chase was feeling right now. Chase looked up at him, took a deep breath, and said, "There was too much commotion tonight. I have to go cooperate with the police investigation." Ethan nodded. Okay. After Chase left, Ethan had Dylan send the board members home. The old men were so terrified they couldn't even breathe. Soon, only Ethan and Evelyn remained in the vast courtyard. "I knew Harrison had planted moles around us, but I never expected so many," Evelyn murmured, pouring Ethan a glass of wine. This was why she had only been momentarily stunned when her own people had turned on her. In fact, Ethan hadn't intended to bring anyone tonight. It was Evelyn who had insisted, for insurance, that he bring some trusted men, if only to intimidate the directors. Now, Ethan understood. Evelyn had wanted to use the opportunity to root out the traitors. This woman, in just one night, how many things had she accomplished? Ethan had to admit, he was no match for her. "Chase knows you, young master?" Evelyn asked. Ethan, holding his phone, seemed distracted and didn't reply. "Well, at least no one got hurt." "But Harrison..." Sigh. Evelyn sighed. She wanted to say that with Harrison alive, he would be a future problem, but she held her tongue. Instead, she changed the subject. "Young master, grandfather will definitely question you. Just deny everything. I hired Thai assassins for tonight. We can say it was revenge from the remnants of Everett Yates's gang, who fled to Thailand. Even if it doesn't fool the old man, the excuse is plausible enough." Her planning was nothing short of meticulous. The document calling for Harrison's dismissal was further proof that their branch didn't want to kill him. If Harrison had died, even if Theodore knew the truth, he would have no reason to blame Ethan. As the sole heir, whose else could the Vance empire belong to? With the recommendation of the board, Ethan would soon take office. Thinking back on everything Evelyn had orchestrated tonight, a woman only 30 years old, even with a high IQ, how could she possess such deep cunning? Ethan lifted his eyes and looked at Evelyn with a strange expression, contemplating for a moment. "Don't touch Harrison again," he said. He then looked down at his phone, his gaze flickering, his mind replaying all the recent events. After a long while, he frowned and sent a text to Leo Bishop. "Tail someone else for me." "Leo? Who?" "Ethan Dr. Linus Hayes." The next day, at the Federal Building, Director Quentin Irons, exhausted after an all-nighter, went up to the rooftop and silently lit a cigarette. The morning air after the rain was remarkably clear and cool, a faint taste of the sky sliding into his lungs. The heavy clouds that had plagued the night had been scattered by the dawn, revealing a crisp blue sky. Irons stared into the distance, taking slow drags from his cigarette. After a long time on the rooftop, he returned to his office. His secretary, Mr. Evans, who had also pulled an all-nighter, was dozing at his desk. Hearing the door open, he snapped awake. "Go get some sleep, Evans." Irons's voice was raspy. He walked to the water cooler and poured himself a glass of water. "Mr. Evans stretched and gave a sheepish smile. "We're about to crack the district chief, Zhang. Once he's down, I'll go sleep. It's you, Director Irons. You really need to rest. You haven't had a full night's sleep this whole time." Irons drank some water and sat down opposite his secretary, his expression turning grim as he looked at the mountain of depositions on the desk. All these officials who have fallen, besides the Red Tower, every single one of them mentioned Victor Vance. But after all this time investigating, we have no concrete evidence. If Victor were still alive, based on our accusations, even without hard proof, we could hold him for a while, interrogate him properly, and who knows what we might dig up. But now, our Deputy Mayor Tanner is still missing, and Victor is dead under mysterious circumstances. It's like clearing one layer of clouds only to find another. Mr. Evans mused. "I always felt there was something strange about Victor Vance's death. The Red Tower has fallen, the pests in the government have been exposed, and right at this critical moment in our investigation, Victor conveniently dies. And in an accident, no less. Honestly, if his body hadn't been cremated, I would have wanted to verify if the dead man was really him. I'm not without my suspicions about his death either, but we had no reason to request an autopsy at the time. Sigh. Iron sighed. I'm afraid I don't have any more time to spend in Port Sterling. Mr. Evans also felt a tinge of regret, but then again, their mission in Port Sterling was essentially complete. Suddenly, an idea seemed to strike him. Oh, right, Director. The local police reported something to us. Last night, the eldest son of the Vance family was attacked. There were many casualties. Around 11, Harrison Vance and a lawyer friend of his went to the police station to cooperate with the investigation, but they don't know who was trying to kill them. Around 4 in the morning, they both refused police protection and went home. The police are still investigating. Irons' eyes flickered thoughtfully. This Vance family still has major problems. My fear is that they'll become the next Red Tower. Mr. Evans' expression was complicated. Victor Vance was instrumental in bringing down the Red Tower. But with his death, sigh, at this rate, we'll be heading back to the capital soon. Iron stood up and walked to the window. The sky, which had been clear just moments ago, was now showing signs of gathering clouds on the horizon. His gaze deepened. He looked out, his eyes searching. He was like a windshield wiper, tirelessly clearing away the murky rain. But no matter how many times he wiped, the rain never stopped. It was human nature. You could never catch them all. At noon, in the area at Phoenix Crest Manor, Harrison Vance helped Theodore to a rocking chair in the courtyard. The old man didn't look well, his cloudy eyes filled with a complex mix of emotions. Did you hear clearly last night? Theodore asked slowly. Harrison's face was impassive. Absolutely certain. What they were saying was Thai. The old man considered this, the implications clear to him. He sighed. Harrison, you lost badly this time. I can't help you. Harrison knew he was powerless now. Grandfather, I'll go resign this afternoon. From now on, I'll only manage the first branch's business. I won't meddle in anything else. Theodore asked, Are you content with that? Harrison was silent for a moment, then answered with a question of his own. You split the Vance Empire in two because you wanted Ethan to stay, didn't you? The old man also dodged the question. You should have listened to me. Half for each of you. Just then, Ethan and Evelyn Reed entered the courtyard. Harrison looked at Ethan and nodded slightly. Ethan, you're here. Ethan smiled faintly. Brother, you're early. The two of them acted as if nothing had happened the night before. Harrison glanced at Evelyn, then bent down to his grandfather. Grandfather, I'm leaving. There's still a lot to do at the company. Theodore nodded. After Harrison had left, he gave a pointed look at the file in Evelyn's hand and said with a cold smile, What? You've come here to stage a coup. Ethan smirked and said, half jokingly, Grandfather, I never thought I'd be the one to stage the rebellion my father never did. Sigh, don't be angry. You can't blame this all on me. If people hadn't pushed me, I wouldn't have rebelled. Evelyn's expression stiffened. She hadn't expected her young master to be so blunt. Theodore looked up at his young grandson, furious. You bastard. You tried to have your own cousin killed. Ethan didn't argue. If you have proof it was me, I'll accept any punishment, he said nonchalantly. Theodore almost laughed from anger. What good would proof do now? You've already rebelled. In any case, Ethan said, I was just fulfilling my father's dying wish. The old man shook his head and sighed. He paused, then looked at Evelyn. Give it to me. Evelyn respectfully handed him the file with both hands. The old man glanced at it, and just as he was about to speak, she handed him a pen. Theodore stared at her, his tone mocking and cold. They say that my younger son had a revolving door of women, but the one constant was Evelyn Reed. And now I see why. You stay by his side for 10 years not just because you have a pretty face, but because you have the heart of a serpent. Evelyn bowed her head and smiled faintly. You flatter me, Mr. Chairman. Theodore snorted. After a moment's hesitation, he took the pen and signed the document. You dare to make a move against my eldest grandson. I don't know who gave you the courage. Humph. Little Evelyn, I'm giving you one day. Leave the Vance family. Otherwise, I'll have you buried right here on Phoenix Crest. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but Evelyn cut him off. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll go handle the transition this afternoon. No need, Ethan said. Grandfather, there's a lot about the business I don't understand. She can help me. Oh. The old man finished signing, placed the file on his lap, and said coldly, Help you? Or are you hoping I'll die sooner too? Ethan started, but was interrupted by Evelyn. Young master, listen to your grandfather. She then gave a bitter smile and shook her head. To be honest, with your father gone, I wasn't planning on staying with the Vance family anyway. Ethan pursed his lips, unsure of what to say. Ethan, the old man said earnestly, I can let what happened last night go. After all, it was Harrison who first refused to split the inheritance with you. And besides, you did spare his life last night. But no matter what, you must remember, you do not harm family. Ahem. From now on, the Vance Empire is in your hands. Harrison will handle the transition this afternoon. He won't fight you anymore. You must also let him live. You are not to interfere with the first branch's business. Ethan lowered his head. Grandfather, as long as you're here, the Vance family is yours. The old man lectured Ethan for a few more minutes, then sent them away. Outside the courtyard gate, Harrison was leaning against a pillar, lost in thought. Seeing Ethan emerge, he straightened up and smiled faintly. Ethan, can we talk? Ethan thought for a moment, then turned to Evelyn. You go on to the company first. Evelyn looked like she wanted to say something, but just nodded. Watching her car leave, Ethan took out his phone and texted Leo Bishop. My father's secretary will be at the office in about half an hour. Have a few people tail her. A close tail. The license plate is. After sending it, worried Leo might get the wrong person, he sent a candid photo of Evelyn he had taken on the way up the mountain. He wanted to confirm something. And besides, he also wanted to protect her. After all, the plan she had orchestrated last night was meant to kill Harrison. Though his grandfather hadn't said anything, there was no telling if he might move against her in secret. After sending the messages, Ethan walked with Harrison along the mountain road. What do you want to talk about? Harrison took out a pack of cigarettes and offered one to Ethan. Here. Ethan waved it away. I quit. Harrison was surprised for a moment, then understood. Planning on having kids? Yeah, my wife wants to. Mentioning Isabelle always brought a subconscious smile to Ethan's lips, his expression softening. Harrison smiled, lit a cigarette for himself, and said as they walked, You're about to take over the Vance Empire. What are your plans? Ethan smiled back. Want the truth? The two cousins had hardly had any conflict since their first meeting before the new year, except for last night. Now, the tension was gone. They were both smart men. The battle was over. There was no need for it anymore. Tell me, Harrison said, then teased. You're not going to turn it into an assassin's guild, are you? Ethan shook his head with a laugh. Actually, I have no plans at all. Like you said, I don't know how to do business. I don't even know basic social skills. I only know that if someone messes with me, I mess with them back. Let me give you some advice, Harrison said. The elite team your father built is excellent, especially Evelyn Reed. In all matters, listen to their opinions. But first, you have to place them in the headquarters properly and legally. Evelyn is very good at that. Ethan shrugged. Honestly, if this whole thing with my father hadn't happened, I'd probably be overseas by now. Harrison glanced at him and sighed with a smile. It's fate. I accept it. As they spoke, they reached the edge of a cliff. Do you have any regrets? Ethan asked. Harrison shook his head. Nothing to regret. I underestimated Evelyn Reed. He paused. But I do have one regret. Oh, do you know why I was so determined to hold on to the Vance Empire? Harrison asked. Ethan was silent. Do you think I'm just a glory hound? Power hungry? Or that I love money? Harrison took a drag from his cigarette. I don't actually love money, but I wanted to control the company for the money. Ethan smirked. Brother, I don't like talking in circles. Harrison got straight to the point. This country's future lies in technology. I need a lot of money to invest in research and development. Not like before, just opening factories and being an assembly line for foreign companies. We're being choked on the technology front everywhere. This genuinely shocked Ethan. Do I sound too ambitious? Hith. Harrison said, honestly, I know it's not realistic. Building a nation through technology is a long, arduous road, but someone has to walk it. I may not be a good person, but I am, through and through, an American with a heart tied to this country. I feel a duty to act. A heart tied to this country, a duty to act. The 8 words resonated, leaving Ethan stunned for a long time. But it doesn't matter anymore, Harrison said. I firmly believe that with my own abilities, I will eventually walk that path. I'm sure of it. Ethan nodded silently, a newfound respect in his eyes as he looked at Harrison. In his opinion, the heir to the Vance Empire really should have been Harrison. However, since he still had some things to take care of, Ethan didn't say anything. Harrison stubbed out his cigarette, took a deep breath, and asked Chase, Is he your man? Or your father's? Ethan smiled and said nothing. Seeing that Ethan wasn't going to answer, Harrison didn't press further. He fell silent for a moment, then said suddenly, I always thought grandfather would, at most, let you inherit your father's businesses. I never expected him to value you so highly. At this, Ethan met his cousin's gaze. Both their expressions were a little strange. From every angle, it looked as though their grandfather had deliberately planned to split the empire in two precisely because he wanted to keep Ethan. Harrison sighed. Well, I have a lot to do, so I'll be going. From now on, manage the Vance business as well. Don't be as reckless as you used to be. Ethan acknowledged him and watched Harrison leave. He remained at the cliff's edge, gazing at the beautiful scenery of the back mountain, lost in his thoughts. The deaths of Mr. Watkins and Mike seemed to have put a period on everything that had happened. But something still felt wrong to Ethan. A bold, audacious theory had taken root in his mind. A theory he desperately hoped wasn't true. After a long while, just as Ethan was about to leave, he happened to cross paths with Dr. Lionus Hayes, who was strolling leisurely. Seeing Ethan, Lionus paused for a second, then nodded in greeting. "Young Mr. Vance." Ethan opened his mouth, but said nothing, walking past him. Lionus continued on his way, heading deeper into the back mountain. When he reached the narrow, winding path that Mr. Watkins used to frequent, the genius doctor stopped. He looked around, and seeing no one, he started down the path. The path was treacherous. In fact, it could hardly be called a path at all. No one would normally come here. After about 20 minutes of walking, Linus stopped in front of a sycamore tree, surrounded by waist-high weeds. Carved into the tree were 7 inconspicuous words, planted in memory of my wife, Jolie Sue. It was clear the carving was very old. At the base of the tree, there were faint signs of digging. The last time Linus had been here, he had unearthed an urn. In the quiet of the mountains, the cawing of crows sounded like weeping. Linus reached out, his hand gently stroking the name, Jolie Sue, on the trunk, his eyes moist. Meanwhile, Ethan drove down the mountain. Not long after leaving Phoenix Crest Manor, he was surprised to see Evelyn Reed's car parked on the side of the road. Behind it was a beat-up, hand-me-down Wuling Hongwang van. Before he could pull up, Evelyn got out of her car, smiling and waving at him. Back on the mountain, Ethan had noticed that Evelyn seemed to have something she wanted to say. It looked like this was it. He pulled his car up in front of hers and got out. "Young master," Evelyn greeted, walking up to him. She handed him a USB drive. "Here, keep this safe. These are some of the elite soldiers I've selected for you. I've already drafted their transition plans. Just follow the plans on this drive and place them in the headquarters one by one. In the future, if you're ever unsure, you can ask them. Take their advice. They're all very capable." Harrison had been right. Ethan shook his head with a smile. "You're making me look incompetent." Evelyn pursed her lips and smiled. "The young master is just taking over the family business, after all, setting aside everything else. I doubt you even know how many subsidiaries the headquarters has or what industries they're involved in. This is the last bit of help I can give you." Ethan stared at Evelyn, his smile tinged with a deeper meaning. "It seems like everything is under your control." Evelyn shrugged. "Someone has to take responsibility for the attempt on Harrison's life, right? I knew what my fate would be. What if Harrison had died? Weren't you afraid my grandfather would kill you?" Evelyn gave him a playful wink. "The young master would have protected me, wouldn't he?" Ethan took a breath. "What are your plans for the future?" Evelyn shrugged again. "The money your father gave me is enough to last a lifetime." "You know," Ethan said, "I've always wondered, a woman as smart, capable, and beautiful as you could have lived well even without my father. He was such a womanizer, yet you were willing to stay with him for 10 years. Was it worth it?" Evelyn pursed her lips. "It's not about worth. Some things just can't be weighed." As they were talking, 4 disheveled men got out of the Wuling van behind them. Their eyes were glued to Ethan's GTR, looking like they'd never seen anything like it. They gathered around, pointing and chattering in Thai. Ethan looked at the 4 bizarre men, and hearing them speak Thai, he immediately knew they were the ones who had attacked Harrison last night. But it was still baffling. How did 4 beggars like them manage to take out more than a dozen of Harrison's bodyguards, and without a scratch? "Young master," Evelyn said, gesturing to the 4 men. "These are the assassins I hired from Thailand. Don't let their appearance fool you. They're very cost-effective. You don't have many good helpers right now, and you've just taken over the Vance Empire. There are still some people you need to deal with. Let them stay with you for now, just in case." As she finished speaking, the frog-mouthed man walked up to Ethan and smiled with a simple-minded charm. "Sawisti." 2 days later, on a Saturday morning, in the bedroom, Ethan lay on the bed, looking slightly exhausted, his breathing a little ragged. Isabelle rested her sweaty head on his chest, equally tired. "Honey, I have to tell you something." Ethan pecked his wife on the forehead. "What is it?" Isabelle looked up at the ceiling, her brow furrowed. "I have this feeling that there's someone in the storage room on the 3rd floor. Ethan smiled. "You've been watching too many horror movies. Silly girl, that room is just for storage. Even the maids don't go up there." Isabelle shook her head. "You were out busy yesterday and didn't come home, right? Around 4 in the morning, when I got up, I faintly heard footsteps. They were very, very light. I couldn't hear them clearly at first, but when I tried to listen closely, they were gone. And that night it rained so hard, I think I saw a figure flash by in the courtyard. It came over the wall. I had the bodyguards check, but they didn't find anything. Don't be so suspicious. Ethan hugged Isabelle tighter, his voice doting. I'm sorry, baby. I've been so busy lately, I haven't been spending enough time with you. But, Isabelle started, but her words were cut off by Ethan's kiss. Wifey, I want more. Isabelle's face flushed crimson. She playfully slapped his chest. You're terrible. Where do you get all this energy so early in the morning? In the afternoon, Isabelle went shopping with Zoe, leaving Ethan to his own devices. Bored, he sat in his pajamas under the gazebo in the courtyard, sipping tea and watching the unfamiliar bodyguards and maids mill about. For a moment, a complex look flickered in the young master's eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Before long, his phone buzzed. It was Leo Bishop. Ethan nonchalantly set down his teacup, instinctively glancing at the nearby staff. He declined the call, then strolled leisurely toward the edge of the lake before dialing Leo back. Boss, she's been taken. My guys are on them now. This she Leo was referring to as White Fox. After Ethan had sent her down from the mountain, she'd spent a few days at the hospital before buying a bus ticket back to her hometown in Charleston. Based on a lingering suspicion, Ethan had kept Leo's men on her, even having them follow her all the way there. After all, as the head of the Celestial Axis's research project, White Fox was a crucial piece of the puzzle. If Ethan's hunch was correct, the organization hadn't been wiped out at all. It was only a matter of time before they recalled her to continue their work, which was dangerously close to completion. Days had passed with no movement, and Ethan had started to think he was being paranoid, that maybe he should call it off. But now, it seemed his paranoia was right on the money. Have you guys stick to them like glue. Ethan ordered, his voice low. And remember, do not spook them. Don't worry, I've already given the order. Ethan grunted in acknowledgement. He was about to hang up when another thought struck him. What about Ron Wallace and Evelyn Reed? Anything unusual from them these last couple of days? Nothing, Leo reported. That old dog Ron is living it up, taking every opportunity to audition new actresses. As for Evelyn Reed, she hasn't left her apartment since she went home that day. She hasn't left at all? No. Her car's been parked in the underground garage the whole time. Leo paused. Boss, you want me to have someone go up to her place? Pry the door open and take a look? Ethan considered it for a moment. No, let's focus on White Fox for now. After hanging up, a sense of unease settled over him. He wandered over to the pavilion where his father used to fish, cast a line, and waited. About 2 hours later, Leo called again. They're at the airport. They're bringing White Fox back to Port Sterling. Ethan's decision was immediate. Send more men to the airport now. When they land, have your teams switch out cars along the route. I want them tailed, and I want it airtight. You got it, boss. The surface of the lake was still, a tranquil sheet of jade veiled in a silken mist. The weeping willow branches hung motionless, like the hair of a sleeping maiden. Ethan's expression was grim, his hand gripping the fishing rod, his eyes a whirlwind of light and shadow. The world seemed to have frozen, time alone marching to its relentless rhythm. As dusk fell, the setting sun shattered the light. The lamps along the lake path flickered on, casting shimmering ripples across the water. The surface grew restless, waves beginning to stir. The willow branches, once still, began to dance, their movements growing wilder, more frantic. The wind had picked up. The fishing rod, which had been motionless all afternoon, suddenly twitched. At the same instant, Leo Bishop called again. Ethan crooked his head, clamping the phone between his shoulder and ear. He began reeling in the line, his expression strained. It felt like a big one. He didn't know what Leo said on the other end, but the phone suddenly slipped from his shoulder and clattered to the ground. The expression on the young master's face was impossible to describe. A placid, vacant mask hiding a deep and chaotic turmoil. His eyelids trembled, the light in his eyes dimming in an instant. A long moment passed before the violent tug of the fishing rod pulled him back to reality. Ethan resumed reeling, grunting with effort as he finally hauled a massive fish from the water. He unhooked it and, carrying his prize, walked with heavy steps back to the courtyard. As he entered, Lily, who was gathering laundry from a drying rack, ran up to him in surprise. Mister, Ethan, what a huge fish. You're amazing. Ethan managed a faint smile and handed it to her. It's all yours. Okay, Lily nodded, taking the fish with a cheerful grin. Where's the missus? She just got back. Had a few drinks with Dr. Russell. She's in the bedroom now. Ethan nodded, washed his hands in the bathroom, and then went to their room. Isabelle was half drunk, her cheeks flushed leaning against the headboard while on a video call with Zoe. Seeing her husband, she quickly wrapped up the call with her now giddy friend. "Honey, I really can't keep hiding this from Zoe," she said, her voice thick. "She thinks Finn is avoiding her because he's annoyed with her. After we went shopping this afternoon, she insisted on going to Emerald Lake Estates to find him. I couldn't tell her he wasn't there, so I just went with her. Thank God security didn't let her in. She got into a huge argument with him." Ethan slipped off his shoes and got into bed, pulling Isabelle into his arms. "I'll tell her myself in a few days." "Okay," Isabelle murmured, melting into his embrace. Her eyes were half closed, heavy with sleep, her breath carrying the faint, sweet scent of wine. "Honey, I'm dizzy." Ethan gently laid her down, his hands massaging her temples. The beautiful woman stared at his face, her eyes filled with a hazy desire. A moment later, she threw her arms around his neck and kissed him. After a long, passionate kiss, Isabelle tugged on his ear, her voice a shy whisper. "I think I'm starting to have proper thoughts about you. Ethan Vance, you've corrupted me." Ethan pressed his lips together, kissed her cheek, and continued massaging her temples. "Go to sleep. We already had our morning workout. I don't think I'm up for another round tonight." "You?" Isabelle twisted his ear playfully, her smile bashful. "Who said anything about that? You're terrible." Half an hour later, Isabelle was sound asleep. Ethan called her name softly a few times, but got no response. He slipped out of bed, took a pair of earbuds from the nightstand, and connected them to her phone. He put on some music, the volume just right, not too loud, not too soft. Seeing that she was still sleeping peacefully, he quietly left the bedroom. In the courtyard, Lily had found a large basin for the fish. She was sitting beside it, staring blankly at her prize. Hearing footsteps, she jumped up. "Mr. Ethan," giving the fish a tour. Ethan teased. Lily lowered her head timidly. "I was going to cook it for lunch tomorrow. I thought I'd let it live for tonight." Ethan's gaze swept over the nearby maids and bodyguards. He lowered his voice. "This fish is big. Be careful when you prepare it." Lily's smile froze on her face. She nodded silently. "I understand, Mr. Ethan." Ethan smiled, his eyes flicking intentionally toward a small room on the third floor before he turned and walked out of the manor. The GTR was parked at the gate. Once inside, Ethan's expression morphed into a complex mask of anguish. His hands gripped the steering wheel, his breathing heavy, as if a great weight was pressing down on him, suffocating him. After a moment, he sent a text to Leo Bishop, then started the car. Instead of heading down the mountain, he turned the car and sped toward the summit. The area was silent. Ethan walked calmly into the courtyard. As he approached the bedroom door, it was suddenly pushed open by a man who looked like a bodyguard. "Young Mr. Ethan, is there something you need this late? I came to chat with my grandfather." Ethan didn't stop, continuing up the steps. The bodyguard raised an arm to block him. "The chairman has already." Before he could finish, a voice came from within the bedroom. "Let him in." Ethan didn't spare the bodyguard glance. He entered the room and looked around. The personal maid who was always by his grandfather's side was nowhere to be seen. At the sight, Ethan's brow furrowed. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if in despair, then composed himself and walked into the inner suite. The old man was lying flat in bed. He beckoned for Ethan to help him up. Ethan pressed his lips into a thin line, helped Theodore Vance sit up against the headboard, and even thoughtfully placed a pillow behind his back. "It's late." "What is it?" the old man asked. Ethan sat on the sofa, his face a blank mask. "Couldn't sleep. I want to talk to you." The old man shot him a look. "Just took over, and you're already running into trouble. It's fine. You're still young, and you haven't accomplished much. It's only natural that people are unhappy you replaced Harrison. You need to work hard. Learn more, watch more, ask more. Don't be in a rush to build your own power base, and definitely don't be in a rush to purge Harrison's people. Just do what you're supposed to do, understand? After a few more admonishments, Theodore seemed to sense the heavy mood hanging over Ethan. He stopped lecturing and just stared at his grandson for a long moment. "I heard you were fishing all afternoon? Fished until dark?" "I don't recall you having a penchant for fishing." Ethan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I was bored." Theodore pressed. "Did you catch anything?" Ethan looked up, meeting his grandfather's gaze. His own eyes were unreadable. The water was deep. It wasn't easy, but in the end I caught one. A very big fish. The old man paused. "Oh." At the same time, at Mercy Grace Hospital. The private hospital, owned by the Vance family, had 2 underground parking levels. The second level, B2, was smaller than the first. The old equipment storage and morgue had been located there, separated from the parking spaces by a single wall and a fire door, with access strictly forbidden to outsiders. Now, the morgue had been moved elsewhere, and B2 was largely abandoned. Out of superstition, many who knew its history wouldn't even park their cars near it. The fire door was locked from the outside. Inside, it was dark and cavernous. Next to the abandoned morgue was an elevator. Right now, for men in security uniforms, each with an elevator key card hanging from his chest, stood guard at the elevator entrance, their eyes scanning the darkness. The elevator only had buttons for floors 1, B1, and B2. Given its location, it was likely an unauthorized addition. With the morgue gone, even hospital staff rarely used it. But in reality, if one were to swipe the key card the guards wore, the elevator would descend to a hidden third basement level, B3, while the display screen would deceptively show it was still on B2. This hospital had a secret third basement, and right now, White Fox had been brought to B3. The vast space was filled with the Spade and Snake's Eye logo of the celestial axis. The air was circulated by thick ducts running along the ceiling. It was fully equipped with all manner of biological research instruments. No fewer than 20 researchers in white lab coats were at work, while more than a dozen heavily armed gunmen patrolled in 3 rotating teams, likely to keep the researchers in line and to prevent any intruders. But then again, a place like this was practically impossible for an ordinary person to find. Using a hospital as a front was a brilliant move. The floor was divided into 3 zones. After exiting the elevator, a short hallway led to a 200-square-meter rest area. Beyond that lay the sprawling research and experimentation zone, and at the very end were the dormitories. A fire escape was at the end of the hall, but no second elevator. At this moment, White Fox sat on a sofa in the rest area, her expression numb as she took in her surroundings. She had probably known the celestial axis wouldn't let her go, but she truly hadn't wanted to work for them anymore. That's why she had stayed at the hospital Ethan sent her to for a few days. If anything happened, Ethan would surely know. But after a few quiet days, she had let her guard down and taken a bus back home. She thought the nightmare was finally over, but she hadn't escaped their clutches after all. Before long, the faint sound of high heels echoed from the dark elevator shaft. A woman's figure emerged from the shadows and strode down the hallway toward the rest area. "Hello, White Fox." White Fox looked up, a flicker of panic in her eyes. "It's you." The woman approaching her wore a green snake mask. Her voice suggested she was middle-aged. White Fox had never actually met Viper, but she had heard Pig Mask mention her once. "This is the organization's research center. Do you like it?" Viper said as she walked. White Fox stared at her, silent. The Celestial Axis's leader was exceedingly cautious. Even someone of White Fox's rank had never been here. "I know you should be resting right now. And with Boar gone, you probably don't feel much of a connection to the organization anymore." Viper sat down across from her, a faint smile on her lips. "But the organization needs you. Think of it as doing us a favor. When this is all over, we'll give you a huge sum of money, enough to set you up for life. Or you can stay with the organization and enjoy a life of luxury." At the mention of Pig Mask, White Fox grit her teeth and lowered her head, saying nothing. Viper continued. "Ask yourself, has the organization ever treated you poorly?" The leader forbade relationships between members, but he always turned a blind eye to you and Boar. He was even planning to officiate your wedding. The organization hasn't wronged you. Your enemy is Ethan Vance. I swear to you, once you complete the research, I will personally slaughter that little bastard and avenge you." White Fox took a shaky breath, her expression hardening. "Boar is dead. He's not coming back. I'm the one who failed Dr. Jiang. I'm the one who failed Ethan Vance. All of this is because I was a coward. I don't blame anyone else." Viper stared in her eyes. "What? It seems the Vances, father and son, have broken your spirit, given you some trauma? Don't worry, we've taken care of everything. You should know, Victor Vance is dead. I can tell you plainly, we eliminated him. Besides, Ethan Vance never did anything that terrible to you, did he? In the end, that little bastard is too soft-hearted to be truly great. He couldn't bring himself to harm a pregnant woman like you. Before, the leader gave up a body double to throw him off to deceive him. As far as Ethan is concerned, he's already destroyed the organization. And now, he's just seized power, become the new heir of the Vance dynasty. He's feeling on top of the world. There's no way he's paying attention to us anymore. He's just a contemptible fool, not even a shadow of his father." A bitter smile touched White Fox's lips. "I see. You waited all these days to come for me, because you were afraid Ethan was watching me, so you didn't dare make a move. You wanted to convince him the organization was truly gone, so he could focus on being the Vance heir. Is that it? Today, you finally felt sure no one was tailing me, so you dared to bring me back to Port Sterling. And since the journey here was so smooth, you assume that young master has been completely fooled by you. You could put it that way," Viper said, then added, but it's not that we're afraid of him. It's that he can't die just yet. At least, not until the research is successful. Hearing that last part, White Fox's eyes widened in shock. A chill ran down her spine as she stared at Viper. She thought she finally understood who the mysterious, cautious leader of the Celestial Axis truly was. Viper read her expression, but didn't seem surprised. White Fox, of the 8 core members of our organization, only you and I are left. As for the leader's identity, I have no intention of hiding it from you any longer. These are his wishes. In other words, he trusts you completely and still has high hopes for you. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought you to the research center today. You must know, this place is the organization's most vital secret. You can't let him down. After the initial shock of the leader's identity wore off, a cold laugh escaped White Fox. Trust? I think it's more like the organization has no other researchers to use and no other facility to work in. Building a new one would be expensive and time-consuming, not to mention having to guard against Ethan. But most importantly, it would waste time. The research is nearly complete. The leader doesn't have the patience to wait. You don't trust me. You have to trust me. You're really hurting my feelings, you know? Viper chuckled, but her tone turned icy. In any case, think about your child, all right? I'm done with threats. White Fox suddenly shouted, her voice trembling with emotion. Just kill me. Do you have any idea how many monstrous things I've done for you over the past 10 years? I've had enough. Viper sighed in disappointment. White Fox, you should know, the organization has many ways to make disobedient people compliant. Just as she finished speaking, a soft ding echoed from the elevator, followed by the sound of the doors sliding open. Whoosh! Viper instinctively turned her head. The patrolling gunmen all rushed toward the elevator shaft. The lead gunman pressed his comms. Hey, who just came down? Normally, the guard stationed at the B1 and B2 elevators wouldn't come down to B3. Any emergency would be handled over the comms. But after the gunman's question, the channel was dead silent. Not even the usual static. Someone had tampered with their communications. For a hacker, it was child's play. The next moment, a scruffy, ugly guy with a mouth like a frog's popped out of the shadows, a goofy smile on his face. In his right hand, he carried an axe. In his left, he held a bloody, severed hand, which was still clutching an elevator keycard. Sawasdee crap, the frog-mouthed man said, rubbing the axe against his head as he offered a polite, smiling greeting. Meanwhile, at Phoenix Crest Manor, inside the Eyrie, the old man and his grandson were still exchanging clipped, aimless words. Ethan, you seem down tonight. What's wrong? Did something happen? Ethan lowered his head, his expression dark. He stared at a pack of cigarettes on the coffee table for a moment, then pulled one out, placed it between his lips, and lit it. Having not smoked for days, the nicotine hit him hard, making him dizzy. He was silent for a moment before he spoke. It's nothing. I was just thinking about what kind of ending would be worthy of the big fish I caught. The old man looked at him, his gaze slowly turning complex. Just then, both of their phones rang at almost the same time. Seeing the incoming number, the old man's brow furrowed, but he didn't answer. He just kept watching Ethan. Ethan remained impassive. He answered Leo's call. Yeah, I know. He slowly raised his eyes to meet his grandfather's, and a few icy words forced their way through his clenched teeth. Leave no one alive. The old man closed his eyes, a wave of weariness washing over his face. He let out a long sigh, then answered his own phone. He said nothing, just a single, grim Ethan stared at him, unblinking, the smoke from his cigarette stinging his eyes, turning them red. His face was a thundercloud. Why, he rasped. Theodore Vance looked up at the ceiling, his brow wrinkled in another deep sigh. He struggled to sit up, his gaze fixed on his grandson. After a ragged breath, he asked mournfully, Did you have to force my hand? I gave you 2 scapegoats. I gave you the Vance dynasty. I cough. Why couldn't you just let it be? Ethan took a drag from his cigarette, the embers of murder now glowing in his eyes. Why? Theodore narrowed his eyes, and after a moment's thought, sighed. Of course. The problem was White Fox. I waited all these days, saw no one tailing her, and only then did I send my people to Charleston to get her. I even had them search her, found no tracking device. I was starting to think, maybe your hacker friend really had left the country. Maybe you really had been fooled. I was careless. I never thought you'd have such skill trackers. All this time, my men never even noticed them. Ethan exhaled a thick cloud of smoke, his jaw tight. He repeated the same word. Why? Theodore slowly shook his head. If a man doesn't look out for himself, heaven and earth will destroy him. I just want to live. There is no why. A sudden rage erupted from Ethan. I'm asking you why you killed my father. He was your son." The words had barely left his mouth when 4 or 5 bodyguards burst into the room, guns drawn, all aimed at Ethan. The leader shot Theodore a look, asking for permission to fire. At the same time, the sound of urgent footsteps echoed from the courtyard. It was clear there were more gunmen outside. Theodore waved his hand, signaling them not to shoot. After a cough, he answered Ethan's question. "Your father, alive, was the biggest threat to me. He had already started to suspect me, long before you did. You preach about not harming family, but in the end, you killed your own son." Ethan was livid. "Are you even human?" Theodore's eyes were cold and hard as he glared at Ethan. "He forced me to do it. Grandson, I truly don't want to kill you. You shouldn't have forced my hand either. Don't want to." Ethan found it laughable. "You're just waiting for your research to succeed, aren't you? I'm nothing more than your catalyst." The truth was, the reason Ethan had suspected his grandfather was the leader of the Celestial Axis all along was because of what White Fox had said. That research. The success rate is much higher for people who are blood relatives. That was why he could never believe Mr. Watkins was the true leader. Even if he was involved, Theodore had to be the one pulling the strings. Thinking back to 10 years ago, why hadn't those men killed him? Why had they treated his wounds and kept him alive? And later, even when he relentlessly investigated the Celestial Axis, even when he cut off their funding, why had they never sent assassins after him? It all made sense now. Because Theodore Vance wanted his catalyst to stay alive and well, just waiting for the research to be completed so he could replace his own failing organs and spinal fluid with Ethan's, all for the sake of a longer life. Hearing his words, Theodore finally dropped all pretense. "In truth, I never once acknowledged you as a bastard of the Vance family." The words were a shard of ice in Ethan's heart. "You couldn't bear to sacrifice Harrison, so you chose me. Is that it? Heh, look at you, so full of humanity." Theodore took a breath, the last traces of grandfatherly kindness gone from his face, replaced by cold indifference. "You dare to come here alone, probably because you're betting I won't kill you. You're right, I won't. But I'd still advise you to call your men and have them pulled back from the research center. Otherwise, you don't really think Arthur Thorne's little assassin can protect his daughter all by herself, do you?" In Victor's old courtyard, Lily was still sitting by the front door, staring into the basin at the big fish. A moment later, she sneezed unexpectedly, rubbing her nose. "Is Benny cursing my name?" she muttered. Just as she spoke, she noticed the bodyguards and maids in the courtyard closing in on her, their movements coordinated and menacing. Lily remained outwardly calm. She rose, walked into the living room, and went straight to the breaker box. As if she had been preparing for this all along, she smoothly flipped the main switch, then grabbed a pre-placed bucket of water and doused the entire panel. The courtyard was instantly plunged into darkness, the pale moonlight filtering through the windows, casting an eerie, sinister glow. More than a dozen bodyguards and maids gathered outside the door, all drawing their weapons. "The chairman is still negotiating with the bastard," the lead bodyguard said in a low, grim voice. "We need Isabelle Thorne alive. Lily can't be left." The others grunted in unison and moved into formation, storming the house. From their coordinated advance and combat-ready postures, it was clear this was a professionally trained team. One of the maids, thinking she was clever, felt her way to the breaker box in the dark and tried to flip the switch back on. But the instant she did, the box erupted in a shower of sparks. After a loud crackle, she collapsed to the floor. The next moment, muzzle flashes lit up a side room deep within the hall. The silent shots were rapid and muffled. In 2 or 3 seconds, several bodyguards went down with headshots. The rest of the team immediately returned fire. The lead bodyguard took cover behind a sofa. Team 1, push forward, secure Thorne. Team 2, covering fire. Surround and eliminate Lily, he hissed. The gunmen split up. Soon, the 6-man Team 1 was on the second floor, cautiously approaching Isabelle's bedroom. 2 men flanked the door as sentries, while 3 knelt, guns aimed at the entrance. The last man reached for the doorknob. But just as he was about to turn it, a section of the ceiling above them shattered, and a figure dropped from the darkness. The figure's knees landed squarely on the shoulders of one of the kneeling gunmen. With a powerful twist of the waist, the attacker's legs clamped around the man's head and snapped his neck. At the same instant, a crescent-shaped blade flashed from the figure's hip, arcing left and right, dispatching the other 2 kneeling gunmen. It all happened in a heartbeat. The remaining 3 men barely registered what had happened, only catching the glint of a silver cross in the moonlight. Before they could react, the curved blade lashed out again, plunging under the jaw of the man on the right side of the door. Simultaneously, the killer grabbed the gun of another man, his thumb jamming the mechanism behind the trigger, preventing it from firing. In a flash of motion, the blade sliced out horizontally from the first man's jaw and, in one fluid movement, slit the throat of the second. Isabelle, the last remaining gunman, finally saw Finn's face splattered with blood. A cold dread crawled up his spine. In his panic, he aimed his gun at Finn and inadvertently twisted open the bedroom door. Finn's reaction was lightning fast. He kicked the man's gun hand, then drove his blade into his throat, ensuring a silent, swift death. With a single kukri, he had eliminated 6 gunmen in a matter of seconds. Finn raised a hand to the cross on his chest, rubbing it gently as he tilted his head and glanced through the crack in the door. In the pale moonlight, his sister-in-law was still sound asleep, earbuds in place. A stiff smile touched Finn's lips, but realizing it didn't suit him, his face returned to its usual blank, endearingly dopey expression. He gently closed the door, sheathed his kukri, and drew 2 pistols from his waist, heading for the stairs. Downstairs in the living room, the second team was still hunting for Lily. The seemingly harmless young woman had transformed, her blood awakened. She moved like a ghost, firing a shot and melting back into the shadows, clearly enjoying the game. One gunman, hiding at the bottom of the stairs, called out, "Lily, be smart and come out. Don't be a fool. For old time's sake, I promise I won't hurt you." "Did you hear me? Our men have already gone for Isabelle Thorne. You have no choice." As his words faded, a soft footstep echoed from the stairs above. The gunman peeked his head out, looking up eagerly. Thwip, thwip, thwip. As the shell casings clattered to the floor, the gunman collapsed, 3 neat holes blossoming on his face. Finn calmly put on a pair of sunglasses. They looked ordinary, but to him, the dark hall was now as bright as day. After a few more sporadic shots, Finn stood in the center of the living room. He looked down at a gunman at his feet, still clinging to life, and generously delivered a final bullet to the center of his forehead. Lily, wearing an identical pair of sunglasses, emerged silently from the shadows. She looked around at the bodies strewn across the floor, a hint of disappointment on her face. Finn glanced at her. "The M200 is in the 3rd floor room. Go get it. Once you have it, guard the boss's wife's door. Chase and Dylan are on their way with their men. Let them handle the bodies." "Oh," Lily replied unenthusiastically. She paused, then looked up at Finn. "What about Mr. Ethan? He's still in the wolf's den." "He'll be fine. Just protect Isabelle," Finn said, then turned and walked out. Lily pouted, looking like she hadn't had her fill of killing. "Boring," she muttered as she headed upstairs. It was more fun shooting blanks at Benny. In the bedroom, Isabelle's drowsy eyes fluttered open. It took a long moment for her alcohol-addled brain to focus. She saw her phone screen, an indie song called "I'm Willing" playing, but what came through the earbuds was her husband's own, slightly off-key singing. A happy smile spread across her face. She rolled over and drifted back into a deep sleep. One door separated heaven from hell. Meanwhile, in the B3 level of Mercy Grace Hospital, the research center was a river of blood, the floor littered with bodies. More than a dozen experienced enforcers from the East Side Syndicate lay dead or dying. The survivors were now delivering kill shots, making sure no one was left alive. White Fox lay in a pool of blood, apparently struck by a stray bullet. A look of serene release was on her face. At the end of the hallway, by the fire escape, Viper was locked in a desperate battle with the 4 Thai assassins she was trying to escape from. By now, the one who wanted to buy a tractor had been shot several times and was barely breathing. The others were wounded but still fought ferociously. Both sides were out of ammo. The frog-mouthed man had torn Viper's mask off, revealing the face of Theodore Vance's personal maid. She was a plain-looking woman of about 40, thin and wiry, but she fought with vicious, efficient movements, every strike aimed at a vital point. With his 2 brothers providing a distraction, the frog-mouthed man leaped into the air, his axe aimed straight for Viper's head. But she just dodged, then delivered a single knife hand strike that snapped the wooden handle of the axe in 2. The frog-mouthed man was stunned. "What a terrifying woman," he muttered, a lecherous grin still plastered on his face. The assassin who spoke English stared at Viper. Seeing her take a deep, centering breath after breaking away from them, his eyes lit up. "I know," he exclaimed to his brothers. "It's that Chinese iron body technique." How? How can a woman know a technique like this? Viper, of course, couldn't understand their frantic chatter. She just wanted to get away and back to the chairman's side. She took another deep breath, and in the blink of an eye, her face flushed in even deeper red. Her eyes were murderous. Her hands formed into tiger claws as she lunged forward like a pouncing tiger. The frog-mouthed man dropped the broken axe handle and let out a roar. The three of them charged to meet her. True martial arts were not the flowery, choreographed dances seen on stage, nor were they the fitness routines used for health. The arts developed by the ancestors were purely for killing, though few true masters remained. Though she was a slender woman facing three brutes, Viper showed no fear. After a brief exchange, she once again gained the upper hand, dislocating the frog-mouthed man's left arm with a single palm strike. At the same moment, he managed to land a punch on her abdomen, but it was like hitting a steel plate. It had no effect at all. The other two were out of options. They could only charge forward with brute force, but Viper's precise strikes kept them from getting close. The dying tractor coughed up blood. He forced out his last words. Where's our backup? I need to make 200,000. Buy a tractor. I want a farm. Get a wife. The frog-mouthed man, half lying on the floor and clutching his shoulder in agony, heard his brother's words and gritted his teeth. Hang on. If we have to, once we knock this woman out, you can have her first. Tractor's eyelids fluttered. As he looked at Viper, a flicker of desire truly did ignite in his eyes. But the next moment, the other two assassins were also knocked to the ground. Hope was extinguished. With one last gasp, Tractor died, a virgin to the end. Viper slowly closed her eyes, took a breath, and looked down at them with contempt. So, have you now seen the power of the iron body technique? Ha ha! Useless trash. She started walking toward them slowly, preparing to send the other three on their way. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the stairwell. The frog-mouthed man looked toward the sound and saw a massive shadow land on the staircase landing. For a moment, his despair vanished, replaced by relief. Finally, he muttered in Thai. Viper had turned at the sound of the crash, ready to fight. But when she saw a behemoth of a man hurtling toward her like a falling meteor, her eyes widened in shock. At the last second, the top-tier assassin, trained for years by Theodore Vance, reacted, taking a step back. But almost simultaneously, a massive hand clamped down on her shoulder like an iron vice. Viper struggled, punching the giant in the torso, but the force of her blow was absorbed by his thick layer of fat. It was like swatting a fly. The next moment, the giant lifted her into the air with ease and, like swatting a rat, slammed her brutally against the stair railing. Iron body technique. Crunch. Iron body, huh? Bam. Crunch. I'll give you an iron body. Bam. The railing bent and warped. Viper's iron body technique was utterly useless against this absolute brute force. She was slammed until blood poured from her eyes, nose, and mouth. To hell with your iron body. Benny swung his arm, his fist the size of a bowling ball smashing into Viper's face. After just 3 punches, her head was a misshapen, bloody pulp. The 3 Thai assassins' mouths hung open, staring at the giant as if he were a monster. Benny turned, scratching his head with a goofy look. Sorry, guys. I got lost. The scene fell silent, except for the faint sound of shouting from the giant's earpiece. Damn it. Benny, you idiot, what took you so long? Get up here, head to the manor. The rest is for the East Side Syndicate to handle. Phoenix Crest Manor, the Eyrie. The old man had told Ethan to call off his men. Ethan, his face a mask, made a call, said nothing, and hung up after a dozen seconds. He looked at his grandfather with a taunting expression. Too late. A flicker of anger crossed Theodore's eyes. Ethan, you don't really think your little gang of misfits from the East Side Syndicate can challenge me, do you? Ethan ignored the question. Interested in a chat? I have so many questions for you. Theodore's gaze turned sinister, and he answered with a question of his own. Your brothers, they never left? This whole fight over the inheritance, it was all an act from the beginning, wasn't it? To make me let my guard down. Ethan's lips curled. You shouldn't have taken this long to figure it out. You think I dared to tear things down with just the East Side Syndicate? Do you really think I lost my mind out of anger? Theodore's expression grew heavy. He gave his lead bodyguard a look, signaling him to contact the gunmen disguised as maids and bodyguards at Victor's courtyard. In truth, it wasn't that the old man was slow. The entire manor was under his surveillance. If Ethan's 3 brothers had come to the estate, he would have known. So, in his mind, Isabelle was only with Lily. Furthermore, Viper's men had personally seen the 3 brothers get on a plane. How could they not have left? But now he was threatening Ethan with Isabelle, and Ethan was unervingly calm. It didn't add up. He had underestimated the skill of that top-tier agent, and Ethan, for his part, had absolute faith in Finn. A moment later, the lead bodyguard hung up his phone and shook his head at Theodore, his expression deeply unsettled. Theodore frowned, pondering. Your brothers, they really are a headache. I remember, the hacker is number 5 in your group, right? But there are only 4 of you. Who's the last one? Ethan shrugged, a mocking glint in his eyes. You never met Mike yourself, but you must have asked Mr. Watkins about him, right? What? That son of a bitch didn't tell you. In reality, Milo had returned to the country early, and Mike had joined the team late. The two had never met. Theodore snorted. It's Chase, isn't it? He started out with your uncle. AI. In the end, you never trusted anyone in the Vance family, not even your own father. In that, you just like me. Ethan's smile faded. He didn't respond. Fine, fine. Theodore took a deep breath, glaring at Ethan. I understand now. Today was the day I brought White Fox back. You stayed on a mountain all day, didn't even let your wife leave. It was all to prevent me from getting suspicious, wasn't it? AI, to think I was fooled by a little brat like you. But what about you? You dare to face me alone just because you know I won't kill you. With that, Theodore looked at his lead bodyguard. Cuff him and tie his feet. The bodyguards had kept their guns trained on Ethan the entire time. If he made a single move, they would have fired, though they would have avoided a fatal shot. Ethan didn't struggle. He allowed them to cuff his hands and bind his feet, his dark gaze locked with his grandfather's. Be grateful, Theodore continued. For the sake of our blood ties, I won't sever your tendons. He looked back at the bodyguard. The helicopter is on the roof of the headquarters. Contact the administrator and get it over here. And contact the port. Get a boat ready. We're leaving the country. The bodyguard acknowledged the order. After making the calls, he reported, it will be here in about 15 minutes. He then left the room to rally the gunmen in the courtyard, telling them to take up defensive positions and prepare for an attack from Ethan's men. Ethan looked down, his eyes landing on the pack of cigarettes on the table. A strange, bitter laugh escaped him. Grandfather, it seems you're still quite afraid of my brothers. Theodore didn't fall for the taunt. You certainly caught me off guard today, he sneered. But to say I'm afraid of you, that's going too far. I just don't like to gamble. In the end, as long as I have you and the research data, everything else can be rebuilt. The old bastard was still cautious. Regardless of whether his men could handle Ethan's team, he wasn't taking any chances. Just then, a bodyguard's voice came from outside the door. Dr. Hayes, the chairman is busy right now. You should go back to your room. Oh, Dr. Lionus Hayes, carrying his medical bag, looked like he was there for Theodore's checkup. He responded. Then his gaze swept over the semi-open bedroom window and the guards in the courtyard. He casually pulled out a pack of cigarettes and lit one for himself. The wind had picked up when Ethan arrived on the mountain, and now was blowing stronger. Linus stood facing the courtyard gate, his back to the bedroom. He exhaled a large cloud of smoke, his half-closed eyes watching as the wind carried it directly toward the bedroom window. Only then did he walk down the steps. Normally, Linus would have gone to the medical room next to the bedroom to drop off his bag. But instead, the medical genius walked slowly toward his own room near the courtyard gate, bag in hand. Inside the bedroom, Ethan looked again at the cigarette pack on the table. A bitter smile touched his lips. Grandfather, could I have a cigarette? Knowing his grandson's addiction, Theodore didn't refuse. If he had known that the last time Ethan, cornered by Everett Yates, had called him grandfather and asked for a cigarette, and that Everett Yates had died moments later, he surely would have said no. With his hands cuffed behind his back, the lead bodyguard had to personally light the cigarette for the young master. Ethan took a deep drag. The craving was so intense that he held the smoke in his lungs for a long moment before exhaling, the cloud already thin. Still, he felt a wave of dizziness. Theodore Vance appeared calm, but he was already on edge. He couldn't afford to underestimate his grandson. Daring to come up the mountain alone tonight meant he absolutely had another card to play. Even so, the area was heavily fortified. Even if they couldn't defeat Ethan's men, they could hold out for half an hour, and he only needed 15 minutes. And at the end of the day, with Ethan in his hands, his brothers, no matter how skilled, would be hesitant to act. He simply couldn't see how Ethan could possibly escape. The bedroom was quiet, the bodyguards tense. In reality, they were all Celestial Axis gunmen. Though they hadn't personally faced Ethan's crew, they had heard the stories and didn't dare to be complacent. I was thinking earlier, Ethan said suddenly. A man as cautious as the leader of the Celestial Axis. How could he let that dead pig, Boar, accidentally overhear his secrets? It seems you wanted him to hear it, didn't you? The old man was trying to call Viper. When no one answered, his brow furrowed. He glanced at Ethan and sneered. Actually, Boar was a trustworthy man, but he and White Fox were in love, and sometimes things slip out. Besides, even though they all followed my orders, they were all intensely curious about my identity, especially the Joker. So, I decided to pin the blame on Ruff. If anything went wrong, I'd have a way out. And as it turned out, I wasn't wrong. Bohr did eventually betray me. Ethan's lips twitched. The ash from his cigarette fell to his feet, but held its shape, looking for all the world like it was fake. I'm curious. Why is Mr. Watkins also missing a toe? And what is your relationship with Ruffing and Mr. Watkins? At that moment, in another part of the manor, Dr. Linus Hayes closed the door to his room, turned on the light, and sealed all the windows. He took a bottle of viscous, transparent liquid from his medical bag, unscrewed the cap, and poured it into an iron basin. Then, in a strange motion, he stuck the lit end of his cigarette into the liquid. Instantly, the unknown substance ignited like kerosene, burning with an eerie, pale blue flame. The smoke was faint, but carried an intensely fragrant, peculiar scent. Linus held his breath, then sat on the edge of his bed and lit another cigarette, waiting patiently. His eyes flickered, a dazed look creeping into them, as if he himself were becoming lightheaded. In the bedroom, Theodore had a bodyguard help him put on his shoes. As soon as the helicopter arrived, he could take his catalyst and make a clean getaway. He checked the time. Only 2 minutes had passed to the 15-minute wait. Every second felt like a year. Seeing his grandfather's silence, Ethan dropped his cigarette, but to the floor, crushed it with his foot, and pressed on. The celestial axis killed my grandmother. How did you take it over? Didn't you find it distasteful? Perhaps out of boredom, Theodore finally spoke. That's all ancient history. Huh. He trailed off, a reminiscent look in his eyes. After a moment, he said abruptly, Actually, I killed your grandmother with my own hands. Ethan's fists clenched. Theodore continued, The celestial axis was my creation from the start, a tool to handle my dirty work. I just never expected that one night, while meeting with the puppet leader, your grandmother would discover us. At first, I didn't want to kill her, but she was stubborn, said she was going to expose me. The authorities were already suspicious of me at the time. So you faked her kidnapping, then used her death to clear your name with the authorities? You. Ethan's voice was cold, his vocabulary failing him in the face of such monstrousness. Theodore felt no guilt. What is a woman compared to a career? Humph. As for Mr. Watkins, I truly did consider him a brother. I knew he was an upright man, so I never told him about the celestial axis. Later, after your grandmother died, to completely eliminate suspicion, I personally led a team to fight the celestial axis. In reality, I took my men to fight Ruffing, who had just arrived in Port Sterling with grand ambitions. I planned to pin everything on him and drive him out of the city. That dog, he'd made a fortune using his immense power in the capital and wanted to come back to Port Sterling to be a local king. He was always going to be a thorn in my side. In the final battle, I barely defeated Ruffing, but Watkins was accidentally injured, lost a toe in an explosion. Afterward, Ruffing called, wanting to negotiate a truce. The situation was such that continuing the fight would have been bad for the Vance family. And if I truly angered him, he could have used his connections in the capital to drag me down with him. I probably wouldn't have survived, but I didn't expect that while I was still debating how to proceed, Ruffing requested a meeting and cut off his own toe right in front of me. It was both an apology for what happened to Watkins and an offer to form a partnership with the Vance family. At the time, his connections were a huge asset, and the celestial axis was the perfect tool for him to eliminate his own rivals. For instance, the brother of that federal prosecutor currently in Port Sterling. I had him assassinated. A win-win was the best option. I had no reason to refuse. But publicly, the Vance family and the Red Tower had to maintain the appearance of being separate. For all these years, the celestial axis has done a lot of dirty work without a trace, and Ruffing's network was a great help. But Watkins knew nothing about any of this. In his mind, the celestial axis was wiped out 30 years ago. The fog that had clouded Ethan's mind finally lifted. He could only click his tongue. Your foresight is impressive. You had me chasing my tail over a missing toe. My father, stumbling into your trap, gave Ruffing a reason to want me dead. And you just used Ruffing's feelings for Sienna Sterling to manipulate him. Brilliant. I assume you're the one who sent assassins to the winery that night to kill her. Theodore didn't deny it. That woman had seen Mike, he sneered. Even though she had turned against you because of Ruffing, if she didn't die, word of Mike's presence in Port Sterling might have reached your ears. And if that happened, would you still have thought your father's death was an accident? Actually, I planned to have her killed the day she left the mountain, but your father had men following her, protecting her all the way down. Then someone else picked her up, and they were cautious, shaking my men. Later, I got intel that some of the Red Tower's thugs were desperately looking for Deputy Mayor Tanner. I figured Sienna was trying to kill him, so I followed that lead and found her hideout. I just didn't expect you to have men protecting her, too. Ethan's voice was laced with ice. So, you knew Sienna would tell me about Mike and the photo used to blackmail Ruffa. You knew you couldn't hide it anymore, so you drag out Mr. Watkins to be your scapegoat. It's always the way. One lie requires 100 more to cover it. And in the end, you almost always trap yourself. In Linus Hayes's room, the mysterious liquid in the basin continued to burn. Though the smoke was faint, the sealed room was now filled with a thick, strangely fragrant haze. Linus had already chain-smoked 3 cigarettes. The dazed look in his eyes began to clear. He pinched the bridge of his nose, then opened the windows on the north and south walls. A gust of night wind howled through, carrying the fragrant smoke out into the courtyard. Next, the genius doctor pulled a coiled belt from under his bed. It was lined with scalpels. In the bedroom, the mention of Mr. Watkins brought a rare flicker of sorrow to Theodore's otherwise cold-blooded expression. Ethan continued, "Your good brother, Watkins, was kept in the dark about the celestial axis all this time. How did you convince him in just a few days to willingly become your second scapegoat?" A thought struck Ethan, and his brow furrowed. "You forced him." Theodore took a deep breath. "He died a worthy death. You probably don't know this, but Dr. Hayes is the illegitimate son he had years ago with that mistress of his, Jolie Sue. Back then, Watkins's legitimate son couldn't stand it and set a fire to kill Jolie and the child. Watkins was there. In fact, he was the one who locked the door with an iron chain, all to save his own family. But after the fire was put out, they only found Jolie's body. The 6-year-old boy was gone. Now, tell me, for that boy to return and to come to the Vance family of all places, if he wasn't here to kill Watkins, what other reason could there be? What infuriates me is that Watkins knew all along that Linus was his son, but he kept it from me, and Linus was my personal physician, keeping a ticking time bomb like that by my side. I have no idea what he was thinking. That night when Mr. Watkins had come to the area with a file, he had told Theodore what he'd discovered about Linus's identity, that he wasn't Sylvia Vance's godson. That part was true. Sylvia's real godson was currently a volunteer in Africa, but he had hidden one thing, that Linus was his son. In truth, Theodore had already figured it out. He'd noticed the subtle sadness in Watkins's eyes whenever he saw Linus, and it made him suspicious. He had Viper search Watkins's room. She found the memorial tablet hidden in the closet, the same one Victor had found, and the 2-inch photo of small, raggedly dressed boy of about 5 or 6, with a crescent-shaped birthmark on his right shoulder, near his neck. It was a birthmark that would be hard to miss, even with clothes on. This was why Victor had been so shocked when he saw the photo, exclaiming, "Is such a thing possible? You used Watkins's guilt over Linus, promising him you would give Linus a life of wealth and privilege. That's why he was willing to die for you, wasn't it?" Ethan surmised. Theodore nodded. "Honestly, Linus is a great talent. He could be very helpful to my research. Having Watkins sacrifice himself served 2 purposes, to fool you and to avenge Linus. When the time was right, I would have revealed everything and brought him completely into my fold. This was why Theodore had made Linus the vice president of Mercy Grace Hospital. First, ensnare him with money and power, then, when the time was right, win his heart and secure this once-in-a-lifetime talent for himself. With the story told, Theodore checked the time. About 4 minutes until the helicopter arrived. Outside, all was quiet, except for Chase leading a dozen men from the East Side Syndicate up the mountain, though they had gone to Victor's courtyard, not the Eyrie. At this point, even if they stormed the Eyrie, it would be too late. Yet, despite how impossible the situation seemed for Ethan, Theodore didn't dare relax. His young grandson had given him far too many surprises. The next moment, Theodore caught a faint, fragrant scent. A few of the bodyguards noticed it too, exchanging confused glances. At the same time, the man Theodore was just talking about, Linus Hayes, fastened his belt of scalpels, a freshly lit cigarette dangling from his lips, and pushed open his door. In the pale moonlight, the genius doctor was bizarrely dressed in a transparent plastic raincoat. He stood under the eaves, looking at the dazed, seemingly drunk bodyguards in the courtyard. A faint smile played on his lips. His eyes, usually devoid of emotion, were suddenly filled with a murderous light, tinged with a terrifying excitement. In the bedroom, the lead bodyguard, who was about to go investigate the scent, suddenly felt dizzy and had to brace himself against the wall. The other bodyguards also felt a wave of vertigo, as if their souls had been bewitched. Their bodies went limp, unable to even hold their guns, and they slumped to the floor. Theodore's eyes widened in disbelief. What did you do?" he gasped. As he spoke, he felt his own head swim, his stomach churn. He didn't even have the strength to blink, though his mind remained sharp. The other bodyguards were the same, Minds clear, bodies paralyzed. Ethan stared at Theodore with a chilling gaze. He tried to stand and get the keys from a guard to unlock his cuffs, but his own legs gave out, and he sank back onto the sofa. Damn, this stuff is strong. On top of that, he'd already had his workout twice today. That probably had something to do with it. The reason he wasn't as paralyzed as the guards was, of course, the cigarette. The antidote was in the smoke. That's why the guards inside the room were affected later than the ones in the courtyard. While Ethan smoked, they had inhaled some of it secondhand. But the dose was too small to be effective. Theodore's eyes were wide with shock. He quickly realized what had happened. They were poisoned, and Ethan's smoking was a prelude to the antidote. Linus, he blurted out. The only person besides Viper who could freely enter his room and touch his cigarettes was Linus. And the only person who could be connected to drugs was Linus. But why? Theodore couldn't understand. Mike had said he'd never met the so-called number 2, and Ethan's current 5-man team had been re-ranked later. But he had heard that there was once a brother codenamed the Butcher who was well-connected all over the world and rarely stayed with the team. That Butcher was likely the current number 2. Linus was a doctor, a top talent who had been sponsored to study abroad. How could he possibly have a nickname like the Butcher? In the courtyard, the man who normally healed the sick now held a bloody scalpel in each hand. The raincoat draped over him was spattered with blood. In the darkness, he was a terrifying sight. The bodyguards looked on as if they were seeing a ghost. But their bodies could do nothing but blink. They couldn't even raise their guns. They were lambs to the slaughter, waiting for the Butcher's baptism. Under the moonlight, the rain-coated Linus Hayes was the embodiment of death. He spun a scalpel between his fingers with a flourish. The sharp blade sank into flesh as easily as cutting tofu, leaving only a fine, thin line. A few seconds later, blood would gush from the cut. In just a few minutes, the courtyard was a river of blood. Every one of the bodyguards had their throats slit, their blood spraying as they died in a silent symphony of terror and suffocation. Linus himself was drenched in red, blood dripping from his raincoat onto the ground. He stood like a demon in the center of the courtyard, admiring his handiwork with cold eyes. Noticing the blades in his hands had dulled, he pulled 2 more from his belt. He looked up at the 2 snipers slumped on the roof, then threw the scalpels with incredible force. The first one embedded itself precisely in a sniper's forehead. The second was slightly off, lodging in the other sniper's face. Rusty, Linus muttered to himself, not bothering with another showy move. He kicked up an AK from the ground, caught in his right hand, and slapped the bolt with his heel. He then raised the rifle with one hand and put a single, fatal shot through the remaining sniper. The entire sequence was fluid, without a single wasted motion, without even a need to aim. The medical saint who could save a man from the brink of death. The god of death who could handle an AK with one hand. This was number 2, Linus Hayes, the man who had once almost killed Ethan for a friend. His fate was so similar to Ethan's. Both had escaped death, both lived for revenge. Years ago, it was actually Mr. Watkins who had let him go. He would never forget the complex expression on the old butler's face amidst the flames of that fire. It was in that moment that the seed of revenge had been planted in his heart. But he was too young then. The seed only began to sprout after he was sponsored to study abroad. Using his innate medical genius, Linus had thrived in the criminal underworld overseas, working with countless criminal organizations. He truly had friends all over the world. He had met Ethan through a mutual friend, an arms dealer who had been double-crossed by Ethan twice and had sought Linus's help. At that time, Finn hadn't yet joined the team, and Ethan found himself facing a god of death who was not only a formidable fighter with a vast network, but also an expert in biochemical weapons. Naturally, Ethan had suffered a great loss. It was during their 3rd confrontation, when they finally came face to face, that Linus recognized Ethan. For Linus, his enemy was the Vance family's butler, a man who was like a brother to Theodore Vance. To get his revenge, he would have to face the entire Vance dynasty. So, of course, he had investigated every member of the family. How could he not recognize Ethan? And at that time, though Ethan wasn't sure who his enemy was, his prime suspect was also the Vance family. Thus, united by their shared goal of revenge, the two buried the hatchet. Bonded by their tragic fates, they quickly became brothers, planning their vengeance together. Back in the present, after eliminating everyone, Linus calmly walked toward the bedroom. Inside, Theodore Vance, his situation completely reversed in an instant, slowly closed his eyes, his face a mask of despair and unwillingness. Linus's revenge was never yours to deliver, Ethan said mockingly. If it weren't for my business, needing him to be planted by your side, mister. Watkins would have been dead 4 years ago. In fact, Linus's plan to return to the country early hadn't been arranged by Ethan. He had been impatient, wanting to kill that hypocrite Watkins himself. Ethan had repeatedly advised him to wait, to first get close to the old man and uncover the truth before making his move. After all, Linus's identity as a miracle doctor made it easy for him to stay by Theodore's side. "You suspected me from the very beginning?" Theodore stared at Ethan, his expression unreadable. "I even suspected my own father." "Of course I suspected you," Ethan said. Just as he spoke, Linus pushed open the door. The two brothers looked at each other and smiled. "Hurry up and get me out of these, my wrists are killing me," Ethan said. Linus, unhurried, drew a scalpel and calmly slit the throats of the remaining bodyguards in the room. He then tossed the handcuff key to Ethan before stripping off his blood-soaked raincoat, folding it neatly, and walking to the sink to wash the blood from his hands and face. Ethan was speechless. He had to unlock the cuffs himself. He immediately lit another cigarette. After cleaning up, Linus straightened his clothes, instantly transforming back into the respectable doctor. "Shall I?" Linus asked, walking over to Ethan and glancing at Theodore. Ethan glared at his grandfather, his eyes a storm of complex emotions. From a moment he had suspected the old man was the leader of the Celestial Axis. He had been preparing for this. But now that the moment had arrived, his heart was in turmoil. No matter what, revenge had to be taken. A grandfather worse than a beast. What was the point of keeping him alive? At this moment, Theodore showed no fear. He looked at Linus calmly, a mocking smile on his lips. He was only mocking himself. "I always thought that as long as I got rid of your father, my plan would proceed without a hitch. I never thought it would come to this. AI, one wrong step, and every step is wrong. Ethan, make the Vance family prosper. Take good care of Lucy. Don't tell her anything about me. Just say I died of illness. That child, she was very close to me." Ethan pressed his lips together, not responding. After finishing his cigarette, Ethan slowly stood up, patted Linus on the shoulder, and without a word, walked with heavy steps out of the bedroom. Linus was quick. As Ethan's foot crossed the threshold, he heard the faint sound of a scalpel slicing through a windpipe and the gurgling gasp of Theodore trying and failing to breathe. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. It was all over. But in this ending, he felt no thrill of vengeance. Just then, the helicopter arrived belatedly. Seeing the courtyard littered with bodies and Ethan standing unharmed under the eaves, a gunman on the helicopter instantly reacted. He threw open the cabin door and aimed his rifle at Ethan. Ethan, still feeling weak, leaned against a pillar and looked up at the helicopter, making no move to dodge. The next second, before the gunman could fire, a deafening shot roared from the forest behind the courtyard. Boom! The helicopter exploded in a massive fireball. Staring at the fiery wreckage of the helicopter in the courtyard, Ethan grimaced and spoke into his shirt button. "Wendy, a small caliber would have been fine for killing him. Why do you have to destroy the helicopter? That's my property now." Hidden in the forest, Wendy rubbed her shoulder, which felt like it was about to shatter. "Didn't have time to switch," she said plaintively. The shadowy figure Isabelle had spotted on that rainy night had indeed been Wendy. Fortunately, Finn, who had been there to meet her, had covered her tracks in time. To avoid the surveillance cameras, the young woman had lugged that massive rifle up the winding mountain path outside the courtyard wall all by herself. Earlier, when Ethan had caught the big fish by the lake, the message from Leo Bishop had been, "They took White Fox to Mercy Grace Hospital." At that moment, Ethan knew for certain that his grandfather was involved. He had immediately notified Wendy to get into position, preparing for the worst. His return to the manor to put Isabelle to sleep was both to shield her from the night's events and to give Wendy ample time to get set up. Theodore Vance's caution had been justified. His young grandson never went into a fight unprepared. But the old man never imagined this would be how he would exit the stage. "Come on down. You worked hard tonight," Ethan said. Just as he finished, Finn strolled casually into the courtyard. Looking at the carnage, the killing machine took a shallow breath and muttered, "Sheba, this guy is still just as crazy." Ethan looked at Finn, who was covered in blood from head to toe, and couldn't help but laugh. "You want to talk?" Finn looked up at his boss, blinked his doe eyes, and said, "The gunmen along the road. I took care of them. Left no one." Ethan nodded. He tilted his head and tapped his ear. A moment later, a tiny, pea-sized earbud fell out. "The new gear Jack's brought back is pretty damn good." Finn glanced at the sunglasses in his hand and nodded in agreement. The truth was, the three brothers had indeed left the country, but not to part ways with Ethan. It was an act, a cover to procure a new batch of advanced equipment. They had re-entered the country the very next day, landing in a neighboring city, and then taking a boat back to Port Sterling to remain off the grid. The next morning, Isabelle woke up in a haze, her throat parched. As she sat up to get some water, Ethan, who had been sleeping beside her, suddenly pulled her into his arms. Thirsty? MMM. Isabelle's voice was a little hoarse. She rested her head naturally on his shoulder. Ethan affectionately tapped her nose, then turned to the nightstand, picked up a glass, and handed it to her. Here, honey water. I made it for you. Isabelle took the glass, her face radiating happiness. She leaned in, kissed him on the lips, and then drank the entire glass in one go. Ethan forced himself to act as if nothing had happened last night. He checked the time. 8 in the morning. Wife, time to get up. I have a surprise for you. A surprise? Isabelle blinked. Ethan just gave her a mysterious smile, refusing to spoil it. Filled with anticipation, Isabelle quickly washed up and changed, then asked impatiently, Come on, what's the surprise? Ethan didn't say a word. He just took her hand and led her out of the bedroom. In the living room downstairs, Finn was sitting cross-legged in front of a jade guanine statue roughly the size of his head, devoutly reciting from the Bible. Linus sat primly on the sofa, looking at Finn as if he were an idiot, though he didn't dare say anything. Jax was sprawled on another sofa, video chatting with Kimberly Frost, mangling a tongue twister she was teaching him. She shells, by the seashore. Oh, for God's sake, what's so hard about this? Red leather, yellow leather. Christ, you might as well ask me to hack the Vance family bank accounts. Or just strangle me now. Benny was running wild in the courtyard, frantically dodging as Lily, her eyes gleaming, chased him with 2 guns like a small wildcat, hunting a mouse 3 times its size. At the courtyard gate, Chase sat on the steps, his chin in his hands, lost in thought. Only Wendy had driven home alone after last night's battle. Ethan ultimately couldn't bring himself to bankrupt his father-in-law. Seeing all the familiar faces, Isabelle was stunned. They got back late last night, Ethan said with a smile. You were already asleep, so I didn't tell you. Isabelle then remembered waking up for a moment in the night. Ethan hadn't been there. She'd assumed he was busy with company business. After all, he had just taken over the Vance dynasty and had so much to do. Now it seemed he had gone to pick up his brothers. Hand in hand, they walked downstairs. Isabelle happily greeted Finn and Jax. When she saw Linus, she wasn't surprised and even gave him a smile. Ethan had told her before that number 2 was Linus, and that he had been planted in the Vance family because he suspected they were involved in his mother's death. Good morning, ma'am, number 2 said formally, standing up and nodding to Isabelle. Isabelle froze, looking blankly at Ethan. She thought that since Linus was an undercover agent, he shouldn't be so open. Ethan just smiled, feeding his wife a line. It's all over now, isn't it? There's no need for him to be undercover anymore. He'll be with us from now on. Isabelle looked worried. Does grandfather know? The 3 brothers froze for a split second. Ethan kept his composure. He knows. I told him myself. He doesn't blame me. Isabelle sighed in relief. That's good. She paused, then asked Ethan, Are they not leaving again? Ethan looked at Finn, then at Jax. Neither of their faces gave anything away. We'll see, Ethan said. Just then, a white Chevy pulled up to the gate. A moment later, Eva Vance strode in. Chase, sitting at the gate, uncharacteristically didn't greet her. He seemed to look right through her, still lost in his somber thoughts. Eva just glanced down at him, said nothing, and continued walking. Lily quickly put away her guns and greeted her respectfully. Miss Eva. Eva smiled back, her eyes flicking over to the panting Benny. Where's Ethan? Still not up? She asked casually. Benny shook his head like a bobblehead. Nope. The words had barely left his mouth when Ethan came out to greet them. Sis, you're here early. Benny. At the same time, Linus, trying to act casual, ducked into the bathroom, a move that did not escape Isabelle's notice. Eva Vance walked into the living room, greeted Isabelle, and then got straight to the point. Come on, let's go see grandfather. It's the weekend, I'm free. Ethan's performance was flawless. Let's not. I really angered him this time. He's not seeing anyone for a few days. He paused. But his health is fine, so don't worry too much. Ethan didn't want his sister to know the truth about their grandfather. He couldn't imagine the psychological damage it would cause her. Eva gave him a resentful look. I heard you stage a coup. I was going to take you to apologize to him. He's an old man. Aren't you afraid of giving him a heart attack? Let's wait a few days, Ethan said with a helpless smile. It's better not to disturb him. Dr. Hay said he needs to rest. Right, Lynn? Huh? Where'd he go? Isabelle instinctively glanced toward the bathroom. Hearing that Linus was also there, Eva was first surprised, then her face darkened. She followed Isabelle's gaze to the bathroom. Creak. The bathroom door opened, and Linus walked out slowly. He forced a stiff smile. Miss Eva. Eva was furious. What are you always hiding from me for? Am I going to eat you? You're insane. Linus instinctively glanced at Ethan and slowly shook his head at Eva. Ethan? Eva snorted. Coward. You deserve to be single forever. With that, she turned to Ethan. All right then, I'm heading back. I'll come see grandfather another day. She stormed out. Ethan was completely bewildered. He watched his sister leave, then turned back to Linus. Number 2, what the hell was that? Linus swallowed hard, stammering your sister. She. You son of a bitch. Ethan cursed, grabbing an ashtray. I treat you like a brother, and you're trying to hit on my sister? Linus bolted out of the living room. I'm not. She's hitting on me. Ethan chased after him, furious. Get back here. You got some nerve. He reached the courtyard gate just as his phone rang. Chase stood up and greeted him coolly. Boss. Ethan stopped, nodded at Chase, and took out his phone while asking, What's wrong? You still feeling bad about Harrison? Chase's expression was grim and unnatural. All I know is that the chairman was a great benefactor to me. Victor had told Ethan about Chase's past. He was a student Victor had sponsored, and upon his return to the country, he was sent to infiltrate the first branch of the family as a mole. Victor had only ever told Ethan this secret. Ethan could see that Chase and Harrison had a deep bond. Betraying Harrison had clearly left him with immense guilt. Ethan, who valued loyalty, understood completely, but he didn't know how to comfort him. He just patted Chase on the shoulder, as he had before, and answered Leo's call. Boss, Ron Wallace got on the highway at 4 this morning, driving like a thief. He just got off the exit from Miami. My guys are still on him. Ethan's eyes lit up. And Evelyn Reed still hasn't left her apartment. I'm starting to think she hasn't been home at all for days. You want to send someone up? Ethan hesitated for a moment. Have them go up pretending to be building maintenance. You got it. A few minutes later, Leo called back. They practically knocked the door down. No answer. It's weird. We followed her there ourselves. How does a person just vanish into thin air? Boss, my guy used to be a burglar. You want him to pick the lock? No. Just keep a tight tail on Ron Wallace. Ethan's eyes flickered. It seemed he already had the answer. Miami. Nearing noon. In a luxurious villa overlooking the ocean. Evelyn Reed, wearing an apron, was busy in the spacious kitchen. By the pool, Ron Wallace, dressed in a flamboyant pair of floral shorts, was holding a coconut and chattering nonstop. I'm just saying, with you pulling this stunt, what about the money? $70 million. You think I could just swallow that? You have to give me a plan. From a nearby lounge chair, a lazy voice replied with 2 words. Fair enough. Ron was exasperated. How is this fair enough? Huh? You're a dead man now. How am I supposed to get to launder money into your account? Victor Vance, who should have been 6 feet under, held a matching coconut, wore the same floral shorts as Ron, and took a leisurely sip from a straw. I told you back in school you had the brains of pig. See? I wasn't wrong. I'm dead, but my son is still alive. Ron sat up straight, glaring at Victor. A sum that large, you think it won't raise flags? You better have this planned out. I really don't want to spend my golden years in prison. Victor replied, Fair enough, fair enough. The sea breeze was gentle, the sun was bright. The 2 old friends looked like they were on a beach vacation. Ron lit a cigarette. Seriously, Victor, that rebellious son of yours, he really does care about you. You should have seen how devastated he was those 2 days. Victor's face was glowing. No matter what, I am his father. Ron rolled his eyes. Have you thought about what comes next? You gonna hide behind the scenes forever? Not even hold your grandchildren? Let me warn you, if your son finds out you tricked him, he will kill you for real. And forget about you. Your accomplice here will probably be buried right alongside you. Victor said, no rush. We'll take it one step at a time. For now, I'm enjoying this quiet life. Sometimes being dead is better than being alive. Just as he finished speaking, Evelyn poked her head out the window. Lunch is ready. Hey, coming. Ron called out. He turned to Victor, his face a mask of envy. You old bastard, you must have saved the galaxy in a past life. A woman as good as Evelyn, she's completely wasted on you. Victor stood up looking thoughtful. He chewed on his lip. She is a little. At the dining table, Ron looked at the lavish spread and flashed his buck teeth in a wide grin of praise. Look at this, look at this. Our Evelyn is a goddess in the parlor and a devil in the... Can't you just eat without running your mouth? Victor cut him off without ceremony. Ron wasn't embarrassed. He glared at Victor, then turned to Evelyn. Evelyn, from now on, just let the housekeeper cook. Don't spoil him with this nonsense. Insisting on eating food you made yourself. Look at him, acting like he's the king of the world. Evelyn covered her mouth and smiled. In front of Victor, This powerful woman showed no trace of her corporate persona, only a captivating charm and an alluring grace. Evelyn Reed had two signature dishes, a perfectly pan-seared steak with a red wine reduction and a rich, creamy lobster thermidor. They were Victor Vance's absolute favorites, and he insisted she make them for him every few days, a craving he never tired of. Right now, both dishes sat on the table. Victor devoured his meal like a starving wolf, paying no mind to his table manners. Ron Wallace, seated across from him, offered occasional praise for the food. Evelyn ate with slow, deliberate grace, a picture of elegance as she responded politely to Ron's compliments. In no time, Victor was the first to finish. Evelyn immediately set down her own silverware and poured him a small bowl of consommé. Evelyn, Ron brought over the new fake passport for me today, Victor said. I want you to get ready. We'll head to Italy for a while. Now that I'm a dead man, staying in the country is inconvenient. Evelyn hesitated for only a fraction of a second before nodding. She understood. Her young Mr. Vance, Ethan, had ended it all. The chairman no longer had anything to worry about, except for being caught by his own son. One of those Thai assassins died, she reported. The others called me this morning, crying and screaming that they absolutely needed another $100,000. I've already paid them and arranged for transport. They'll be out of the country by tonight. Victor mused for a moment, then sighed. Everything is proceeding exactly as I predicted. The only variable is Harrison Vance. In terms of business acumen, that boy is miles ahead of Ethan. He's also won over a lot of hearts at Vance Holdings headquarters. He really shouldn't be alive. But he won't be a threat to Ethan in the short term. We'll deal with him later. The young master has a kind heart, Evelyn said softly. The boardroom is a battlefield, Victor countered. Kind hearts don't win wars. It's a pity. My carefully placed pawn, Chase, right by Harrison's side. Harrison tested him and found him out. Otherwise, I would have had another card to play. In the end, my eldest nephew is a sharp one. He probably knew all along that Chase was my man, but he and Chase also had a deep bond. That night, when they had their confrontation, Harrison was trying to protect him, too. Evelyn raised her eyebrows in a show of feigned surprise. It seems I guessed right. I knew it. How could Chase possibly know the young master? But next time, could you give me a heads up? You have no idea how tense that night was. A faint smile touched Victor's lips. From the beginning, Chase's mission was to protect Ethan. If Harrison ever developed the intent to kill Ethan, he was to act. Besides, don't say I didn't give you a heads up. Chase didn't know I was faking my death either. If he had been taken out by those Thai assassins that night, it would have just meant I misjudged him. He wouldn't have died undeserving. In hindsight, during that rainy night, the two hysterical brothers had endured far less pressure than Chase. He could have eliminated Harrison Vance at any time. Yet he took the unnecessary step of asking him, "Can you really bring yourself to harm your own brother?" If Harrison had said yes, would Chase have pulled the trigger? Perhaps even he didn't know the answer. He could have taken advantage of the chaos when the four assassins appeared and eliminated Harrison then. But he didn't. Instead, he kept trying to persuade Harrison to stay away from Ethan. It all led to Harrison's final test of loyalty. Even with the gun pressed against Harrison's neck, Chase couldn't bring himself to do it. Ron Wallace kept his head down, focusing on his meal, pretending to be deaf to the conversation between Victor and Evelyn. Victor called him dim-witted, but he wasn't. He knew what to listen to and what to ignore. "Ron," Victor said, "after I leave, help me look after Arthur Thorne in prison. If anything comes up, go to Ethan for help." Ron froze for a second. "Great. So you just wipe your hands clean and walk away." "Fine. Don't worry, I've got Arthur. But that living terror you call a son, he scares me to my core. I wouldn't go to him if the world were ending." Just as he finished speaking, the doorbell rang. Evelyn rose and walked toward the entrance. Ron continued, "I already got on his bad side over that Kimberly Frost business. If he finds out I arranged a body double for you, he'll skin me alive. Hey, no one else knows about this house in Miami, right?" Reaching the entryway, Evelyn glanced at the security monitor. It was just the bodyguard ringing. Thinking nothing of it, she opened the door. The next second, her expression froze solid. She stumbled back 2 steps, her usual unflappable composure replaced by sheer, unadulterated panic. "Nobody knows. Why are you getting so timid in your old age?" Victor retorted brashly to Ron. "No matter what, Ethan is my son. Even if he found out, he wouldn't do anything. I'm still his father, for God's sake. You think I can't handle him?" As he spoke, he glanced toward the door and noticed something was wrong with Evelyn. The old fox's heart skipped a beat. A moment's thought was all it took. He glared at Ron and cursed inwardly. This is bad. He had a pretty good idea who was at the door, and it wasn't hard to guess that Ron had been followed. Ron was completely baffled. "What are you staring at me for?" He didn't get to finish. From the doorway, Evelyn's voice trembled. Young master, what are you doing here? Ron shot to his feet, staring dumbfounded at the entrance. A moment later, Ethan Vance strode in, dragging the bodyguard by the ear. Victor's smile was plastered to his face as he slowly stood up. Well, son, it's all your Uncle Ron's fault today. I told him to bring you here, wanted to explain everything, but he completely forgot. Can you believe this old bastard? I was just giving him hell for it. Come on, you chew him out too. Evelyn, honey, quick, find a pair of slippers for my son. On second thought, I have a pair upstairs in my room. I'll get them myself. With that, Victor turned and sprinted toward the staircase. Ron Wallace broke out in a cold sweat, his face ashen. I am so screwed. Ethan stood in the entryway, his eyes fixed on his father, too furious to form an expression. Seeing Victor halfway up the stairs, Ethan instantly drew a pistol and aimed it at him. Run. You gonna run? Go on, run. Victor froze mid-step, his heart pounding in his chest. Son, calm down. Just listen to me. Evelyn lunged forward, positioning herself between them and spreading her arms to shield Victor. She looked at Ethan, her face filled with guilt. Young master, your father had his reasons. Pete put the gun down. Ethan was incandescent with rage, yet his eyes suddenly turned red. Victor Vance, you wanted to die, didn't you? Why go through all the trouble? You should have just called me. When it comes to making people disappear, I'm a professional. Evelyn, get out of my way. No one could possibly understand what Ethan was feeling at that moment. The overwhelming regret for never having called Victor dad. The remorse for all his past suspicions. The sleepless nights spent agonizing over the fact that his own father had died under a cloud of mystery. And now, this old fox, whose grave should have been sprouting weeds by now, was standing right in front of him, alive and well. There was joy, of course, but it was completely buried under an avalanche of fury. Young master, please just put the gun down, okay? Your father will explain everything. Evelyn pleaded, shielding Victor with her own body. Victor peeked out from behind her, his face a mask of misery. Young master. No, son. Put the gun down. Can't you just calm down? I know you're angry, but my hand was forced. Just let me explain, okay? Besides, think about it. I still owe you $500 million. You don't want that money. The words had barely left his mouth when a beast-like roar erupted from the doorway. What? The next second, Benny's massive frame burst into the room. He glared at Victor and bellowed. I knew you weren't going to pay. You still owe me 20 grand. And let me tell you, I've been calculating the interest on that $500 million every single day. Last time, when you died, I even burned the invoice for you at the wake. You're not just a deadbeat, you're a liar. I cried so hard for you. And you weren't even dead. Victor was speechless. To be fair, Benny had definitely been crying over the money. Taking advantage of the distraction, Ron Wallace tiptoed toward the window and carefully began to climb out. Ethan shot him a sidelong glance. In a hurry to leave, Ron, let me see you out. Perched on the windowsill, unable to move forward or back, Ron forced a rigid smile. I was just cleaning the glass. You guys talk, go on. After a tense standoff, Ethan strode to the sofa and poured himself a cup of tea. Evelyn, sighing in relief, hurried over. Young master, the tea is a bit cold. Let me make you a fresh pot. Before Ethan could reply, Victor chimed in obsequiously. Here, let me make tea for my precious son myself. Ethan glared at him. I don't drink tea made by dead men. Victor pouted, then glanced at Ron, still astride the window. Get down, he said, half joking. My precious son won't drink tea from a dead man. You're a man who's about to be dead. You can make it for him. Ron wanted to scream. Having a friend like Victor Vance was truly the luck of 3 lifetimes. Ethan stared coldly at his father, his voice tight. Victor Vance, you're a master of this game, aren't you? A body double? Shedding your skin like a cicada? And you just left this entire goddamn mess for me. Victor grinned shamelessly. Well, I learned from you, didn't I? You used a double for Gene Marshall, and it worked so well. It was a real eye-opener for me. So I had Ron find me one, too. We even sent him to Korea for some cosmetic work, got the gunshot scar on his leg, just about perfect. Originally, I was planning to use him in case of an emergency, if Director Irons cornered me. But, well, life is unpredictable. I had to use him ahead of schedule. Ethan's eyes narrowed. You knew all along. You knew something was wrong with grandfather. At that, Victor's smile faded. He took a deep breath. Actually, it was Lucy who inadvertently tipped me off. That night, when Lucy said, "One is missing," Victor had immediately reacted, asking his daughter if grandfather was missing a toe. But the little girl told him it was Mr. Watkins, the butler. The news had been a thunderbolt. Combining that with the fact that Mr. Watkins had been practically invisible for days. It seemed increasingly likely that the old butler was the head of the celestial axis. But if it was him, was Theodore involved? Holding that suspicion, Victor went up to the area. He knew perfectly well that Theodore's feet were intact, but he checked them anyway. He did it to test the old man. If Theodore was faking his unconsciousness, he would know his son suspected him. And a man as ruthless as Theodore Vance, if he truly was tied to the celestial axis, wouldn't hesitate to kill to eliminate a threat. So, Victor's meeting that night with the 3 Triumph Investment shareholders wasn't a coincidence. It was a setup arranged entirely by him. He never even went. He sent the double. The purpose was to create an opening to see if anyone would try to assassinate him. And sure enough, that very night, an impatient Theodore sent Mike to do the job. When Victor learned that the double had died in an accident, he didn't believe it was an accident for a second. He was certain Theodore was absolutely connected to the celestial axis. Most likely, he was the leader. And so, he played along, faking his own death and hiding in the shadows. In reality, it was a plan to kill 3 birds with 1 stone. First, it would get director irons off his back. Second, it would allow Ethan to remain and take his place. And third, it would make Theodore lower his guard, giving Evelyn the opportunity to help Ethan rise, eliminate Harrison, and seize control of the Vance family. Then, he would be in a position to deal with the old man himself. He just never expected his son to be even sharper than he'd anticipated, taking care of everything before he even had a chance to make a move on Theodore. After hearing his father's explanation, Ethan's face remained grim. He reached for the cigarette box, paused, and then put it back down. "The 2 of us. We've finally avenged your mother," Victor said with a sigh. "That's one weight off my mind." Ethan's lips twitched. His voice was hollow. "To be honest, this truth is really hard for me to accept. Did you know? The only reason grandfather kept me alive was to use me as spare parts." A murderous glint flashed in Victor's eyes. "To the public," he said, his voice dangerously low, "we'll say he died of natural causes." The 2 men sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Victor changed the subject. "Son, I can't show my face in public anymore. Vance Holdings, it still needs you at the helm." Ethan lifted his gaze and, unexpectedly, didn't refuse. "Fine. From now on, you stay out of all Vance family business." Victor's face lit up with surprise, but then a flicker of suspicion crossed his mind. "You? Why the sudden change of heart?" A small smile played on Ethan's lips. He said something that changed everything. "Dad, how much is ever enough? Vance Holdings, it should be doing something meaningful." That one word, Dad, made Victor's eyes instantly turn red. He didn't hear a single word Ethan said after that. It felt like something was caught in his throat. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Nearby, Evelyn couldn't help but tear up. Ron Wallace, acting as if it had nothing to do with him, continued to feign deafness and wipe the window. Ethan went on. "Since Vance Holdings is mine now, you'll listen to me." Victor nodded without a second thought. "Of course. Absolutely." Then, a beat later, he realized what he'd agreed to. "Wait, what are you going to do?" Ethan smiled. "When it comes to the family business, it's best if you don't ask too many questions." He glanced at Evelyn. "And you, since you can't show your face around anymore, why don't you take my stepmom and leave Port Sterling? I'll send you your dividends every quarter." Evelyn's face flushed. "Young master, please don't joke around." Despite her chiding tone, her hands fidgeted in her lap, her heart fluttering like a captured deer. Victor was still trying to figure out what his son was planning and didn't respond. "I have other things to deal with," Ethan said, standing up. He looked at Evelyn. "In any case, I don't object." It was evening by the time Ethan returned to Port Sterling. After having dinner with Isabelle, he wasted no time, taking Chase with him straight to Harrison's house. The moment they met, Harrison demanded, "What the hell is going on? I went to the manor today, and the guards wouldn't let me in. And what happened to the maids in the First Branch courtyard? I can't get a hold of any of them. Did you get rid of them all?" "Ethan, what are you doing?" Ethan just shrugged. "Big brother, there's something I need to tell you. Brace yourself." Harrison's heart leaped into his throat. "What did you do?" "To grandfather." Ethan patiently explained everything. But, as expected, Harrison refused to believe him. "Ethan, Vance Holdings is already yours. Are you trying to wipe out the entire family?" Sighing, Ethan pulled out a small button and an SD card. "See for yourself. I recorded everything with this last night." Harrison stared, his hands trembling as he took the memory card. After watching its contents, the firstborn grandson felt a chill crawl up his spine, his mind a complete blank. Ethan clapped him on the shoulder. "My work is done. The rest is up to you." Harrison was still struggling to process it all. looking at Ethan with a dazed expression. Ethan cut to the chase. Find a right time and go back to Vance Holdings as CEO. That development plan you mentioned last time. I'm very interested. Harrison was dumbfounded. Ethan smiled faintly. 50-50. We're brothers. We don't fight, but I'll take the title of chairman of the board. I assume you don't mind? Harrison didn't know what to say. He just nodded numbly. The two brothers talked for a while longer before Ethan stood to leave, leaving Chase standing awkwardly in the living room. Harrison glanced at him and said casually, "Drink?" Chase blinked. "Oh, I'll get the glasses." Before he could finish, Harrison swung a vicious punch. Bam! Chase crumpled to the floor, clutching his face, unable to look at Harrison. "Get up!" Harrison barked. Chase got to his feet. He was barely steady when another solid punch landed. "Get up!" Chase gritted his teeth and stood, only to be knocked down again. "Did you know I found out who you were a year ago?" Chase wiped the blood from his lip, still refusing to meet Harrison's gaze. "Why didn't you kill me?" Harrison shook his head. "You were just an undercover mole. What were you fighting so hard for? Taking a bullet for me? Twice. Hey, you in love with me or something?" Chase's eyes flickered up, his voice dripping with annoyance. "You're the one who's bent. Get up. If you hit me again, I'm hitting back." 2 minutes later, both men, bruised and swollen, were sitting side by side on the sofa. They didn't speak, just occasionally clinked their glasses together in silence. At that same moment, Milo, Jax, and Finn landed at the airport in Kansas City. At 2 in the morning, they arrived at an underground casino. Jax, a seasoned pro, disabled the surrounding surveillance cameras. Milo strapped on his belt of scalpels and pulled on a raincoat. Finn calmly hauled 3 cans of gasoline from the trunk, gently stroking the cross that hung on his chest. Mr. Watkins' son was inside that casino. Half a month went by. One afternoon at the manor, Ethan sat sipping tea in the pavilion while Jax chattered away beside him. That role Ron Wallace promised Kimberly. He recast her. "Boss, why don't we just put a couple of bullets in him?" Nearby, Lily was still chasing Benny around, who was ducking and covering his head. Ethan took a sip of tea and said to Jax, "He already cleared it with me. Next month, Kimberly will be getting a major contract. The female lead." Jax's eyes went wide. "Oh, thank God." Just then, Ethan's phone rang. Seeing the caller ID, a small smile touched his lips. Sienna Sterling. On the other end, Sienna's laughter tinkled. "Hey, Trouble. How are you?" "I'm fine," Ethan said. "And you? If you need money, just give me an account number." Sienna chuckled. "Oh, are you offering to be my sugar daddy?" "I'm not kidding. TCH. Ethan Vance, don't you look down on me. I may not be as rich as the new head of the Vance dynasty, but I don't need your pity. 2 days ago, I saw the news. Croft Consolidated has a $50 billion hole in its books. Why don't you take a guess where that $50 billion is?" Ethan laughed. "I get it. You're a very rich woman now." "Hey," Sienna said, her voice warm. "If you have time, you should come visit me in London. It gets pretty lonely by myself." Ethan took a breath. "Take care of yourself." Up on the mountain, in the Eyrie, Eva Vance was still lost in her grief over Theodore's death. In just a few short days, her father had died in an accident, and then her grandfather had passed away. For any woman, it was almost too much to bear. Dr. Linus Hayes stood beside her like a wooden statue, serving as her silent punching bag. He never talked back to her insults, at most muttering tomboy under his breath. Of the 5 brothers, only Finn was missing. 10 days ago, Ethan had made his decision. He was staying. In his own words, as a son and a husband, he had a responsibility. He couldn't just selfishly do as he pleased and make everyone else accommodate him. Benny, without a second thought, decided to stay wherever Ethan was. As for Linus, he had never wanted to live abroad in the first place, so with Ethan staying, he naturally would too. But Finn's situation was too sensitive. An internationally wanted fugitive, a top-tier Korean special agent. With those 2 identities, one slip-up could be disastrous. Jax, also an international fugitive, had initially wanted to leave as well, but for Kimberly Frost's sake, he decided to stay. They had made a pact. After Kimberly's father passed, they would go abroad together. In the end, only Finn went to the small island. That killing machine remained as devout as ever, his days filled with reading the Bible and sitting by the shore, staring blankly at the seabirds and the fish. The brothers had promised to get together on the island for a few days at least once every season. As for Dr. Zoe Russell, Finn didn't know what he felt for her, but he understood one thing. His identity was a massive liability. Having a family was not necessarily a good thing. So when he left the country, he chose not to say goodbye to her. Better to forget each other than to have a formal farewell. Perhaps he would never see her again. And yet, One morning, the brash, outspoken psychologist appeared on the island, dusty from her travels. Finn, who had just woken up and was brushing his teeth, showed an expression that was, for the first time, not calm. Zoe's eyes were brimming with tears. "Finn, do you have any idea how much convincing I had to do with my family? Do you know how much courage it takes for a girl to travel halfway across the world to get here? Are you a man or not?" Leaving without a single word. Finn was in shock for a long moment. "I sheep, crazy woman." Meanwhile, in Italy, Victor Vance nearly had an aneurysm when he learned that Harrison was back at Vance Holdings as CEO. Evelyn, unsure how to comfort him, sat silently by a small stove, brewing him tea. After a long silence, Victor spoke, his voice low. "Evelyn, you've been with me for 10 years, right?" A terrible premonition washed over Evelyn. This was the line Victor almost always used before breaking up with his younger girlfriends. "Yes, Chairman. 10 years. And 8 months. Victor smacked his lips. "Don't you think this kind of relationship is getting a little stale?" Evelyn said nothing, focusing intently on the tea, though a dampness was rising in her eyes. What was coming had finally come. After preparing a cup, she slowly stood up, forcing a smile, though she didn't dare turn to face him. "Chairman, your cholesterol has been high lately. You really need to watch your diet. Also, She was only halfway through her sentence when Victor suddenly wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I meant, shouldn't we try a different kind of relationship? Like getting married or something?" Evelyn's body went rigid. Her eyes darted back and forth. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. "Oh, damn, I forgot," Victor mumbled. "Your father is younger than me, isn't he? Oh, man, this is—" A giggle escaped Evelyn's lips. "So you get scared sometimes, too?" On the island, the seasons were always gentle, and time moved slowly. In the years that followed, Zoe could never quite remember if it was late summer or early autumn on the night she finally pinned Finn down. In his spare time, Linus would go to the back hill. He had long since dug up the urn from under the sycamore tree and reburied it under another one nearby. Jolie Sue had loved sycamores. The autumn leaves, their edges ringed with mottled brown, would curl and drift down in the wind, spinning slowly, gracefully, bidding farewell to life with dignity. Benny, as it turned out, loved winter. The thick military coat saved him from a great deal of pinching. One evening, late in the year, Ethan was pacing anxiously in a hospital corridor. A few moments later, a doctor emerged from the emergency room and spoke to him respectfully. "Mr. Vance, your wife is fine, and the baby was not affected. You can rest assured." Half an hour earlier, Isabelle, 3 months pregnant, had taken a small fall, and it had nearly scared Ethan to death. Hearing the doctor's words, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. After thanking him, he rushed into the ER. Seeing Ethan's terrified expression, Isabelle was filled with guilt. "I'm sorry, honey." Ethan held her tightly. "Maybe you should stop going to work." Isabelle didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I'm 3 months along. You can't even see a bump yet. Isn't it a little early to be taking maternity leave?" Ethan gently stroked his wife's stomach, teasing, "Son, you can't be disobedient like your mother, okay? I can't bring myself to spank your mom, but I can definitely spank you." Isabelle rolled her eyes. "What are you rambling about? Honey, do you want a boy? I like them all. We'll just have another one next year. A match set would be perfect." Isabelle tugged his ear. "You greedy thing. What do you think I am? Honey, the first snow of December is tomorrow. Let's make dumplings together." "Great idea. Milo loves dumplings." The sun set, and a wind as sharp as a knife sliced the dusk to ribbons. Night shrouded the earth, and the vast expanse of stars was slaughtered without a trace by a legion of dark clouds. After midnight, the darkness-swallowed land began to glow with a silver light. On that biting December day, the first snow fell on Port Sterling.